Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Mormon Newscast. It is June. It is Monday night. It's the 22nd already. And we are here with a very unique episode, actually. We've never done an episode like this where we cover one story the entire time, but we just had to do it. I am joined, of course, by Bill Reel. How are you this evening, Bill? And are you ready for this?
This is deeply interesting to me.
Yeah.
For at least one reason is that we are an entity very similar to Mormon Stories, and so I'm certainly watching this from afar, and maybe not quite as far as I'd like to be. So,
Yeah, that's a perfect way to say it. I think you speak for a lot of us. And of course, I'm also joined by Radio Free Mormon, who is the one who will be taking us through this document. We are so lucky to have an actual legal professional on our staff here at the Mormon Newscast. How are you, RFM, and are you
grammar
ready?
Nazi. And a grammar Nazi. Tonight's show is not just unique, it's very unique, said the librarian. I'm fine. Thank you for asking, Rebecca.
Yeah, very unique is, extra double special. Let's just use it that way. So I wanted to pull up one thing really quick before we start. And this is this incredible thumbnail. Some people have been congratulating me for making this. I did not make this. This is Bill. We talked about what kind of thumbnail we'd have, and he sent this. I was drinking some tea in my office at work and I spit it out. It just made me laugh so hard. And I kind of had to, it was on my phone. I kind of had to scroll in to see who was holding the lightsaber. Then I laughed even harder when I saw that it was Elder Bednar. So, Bill, thank you for that. Do you want to explain at all your motivation or brilliant genius stroke, or it was perfect?
well, I'll just say that people are probably wondering why John is Vader and Oaks and Bednar are Yoda and Skywalker. Well, when it's play on Star Wars, of course, but it's a play on the Empire Strikes Back, which is sort of the bad guys getting one up on the good guys. And so also the believers in the church very much see those of us who criticize Mormon as being on the dark side. And so it made a lot more sense to follow the motif of the movie and also play off of the feelings of those inside the faith who criticize us, who criticize the church.
Besides, we can trick more Mormons into watching the show this way. Wink, wink.
Well, if only it were Disney, right? If only we'd use that theme, then they would be watching like crazy. So, all right. Well, as I mentioned, RFM is going to be taking this away tonight and letting us know what's going on. So go ahead, RFM. Tell us what happened today, kind of midday. We were sort of wondering any day now this might happen. Why don't you tell us what happened?
Open Stories filed their answer. So that's the short version. You may recall, you should recall that a couple of months ago, can't remember exactly when, I did a whole show on it, reading the complaint that the church filed against John Dehlin. I'm just going to say John Dehlin. It's John Dehlin and Mormon Stories, but, personified wise, it's John. And this was after, in November, they contacted him without going to court. They contacted him and wanted to try and negotiate some kind of a claim that they had about his using their copyrighted and trademark materials without their permission and in violation of the law. That was their position. So they worked with him. He did a bunch of stuff. He didn't do everything they wanted. They wanted everything they wanted. And because they couldn't have everything they wanted, and now that President Oaks is in the saddle, they filed a lawsuit against John Dehlin saying trademark violation and copyright violation. And they gave a number of examples, which I read, and I'm glad I did, because now that I read it, even though it's been a month or two ago, I remembered sufficiently for it to help me understand what the heck it is now that John Dehlin is saying, because he's filed his answer, which means his response to their complaint. And it's 125 pages, folks. We're not going to read every word. We're not even going to read half of every word, but I have been through it a couple of times. And the second time through, I marked up some things that I wanted to focus on. And what we're going to see in this document is the perils that I predicted with my priesthood. That they were not telling the whole truth when they filed their complaint. And this is the shark that bites you in the ass when you don't tell the whole truth when you're filing your initial complaint, which is you're leaving it to the other side to file their answer and show what a lying sack of crap you are. And I'm looking at you, Curtin McConkie. You were the McDonald's of Utah law firms. This is where the pimply-faced teenage kids go to get a job fresh out of law school. And then they move on from there because this is low. And you know what the judge is going to think of you, don't you? When he reads this and finds out all the stuff that you didn't tell him that was, oh yeah, very relevant in your complaint. I mean, like the whole issue of the fact that for the past 10 years, from 2018, I think it was, whatever time period that was, I think it was a decade. It may have been 6 years, when President Nelson was disavowing the use of the word Mormon. Wow, that didn't make it into their complaint. I seem to recall not reading it and remarking on its absence, because it seemed like that should have been in there. You see, you bring it up in the first place, okay? I hope you're taking notes there at KM. This will be your CLE for this evening. You bring up the bad facts in your complaint, and then you address them in your complaint. You give your best spin on them in your complaint. You don't omit them entirely, hoping that somehow nobody's going to notice, because you should know by this point that the other side's going to file all those facts in their answer, which is what happened here, and you're going to look like a bunch of lying shyster lawyers. Okay, so that's mainly what tonight's show is.
Can I ask one question as a lay person? So you are saying this is John's response. Others I've heard say this is a countersuit. Is this a lawsuit? Is it simply a statement saying what you're suing me about is ridiculous? How do we sort of look at what this is before we dig into the details?
Well, what it is in the title. Do you want to read that, Rebecca?
Yeah, what you circled or the entire thing?
Circled, yes.
Circled. It says answer and counter claims to complaint for trademark infringement and copyright infringement.
So okay, this is a document that is combined. It is their answer to the complaint filed by the church, and it is John Dehlin's counterclaims against them.
Okay, so it's not a lawsuit. Like he's saying, you went after me, I'm now going after you.
It's well, yes, it is a lawsuit.
It is a lawsuit. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm going to have to call Colby afterwards. He'll explain. Well, so go ahead.
I know he will. Landon probably as well. But it's really simple, okay? If you know this, if you've been through the law school, which I almost failed this first class, but the deal is this, okay, is that if somebody files a lawsuit against you, then you can file back any claims. A lawsuit means they're filing claims against you, one or more claims, which are claims that you have violated the law in some way, okay, and should be held to account in some way. The other party, the defendant, needs to file their answer to that, which is generally going to be a denial, at least of the relevant accusations. Otherwise, there's no need for a lawsuit if you admit to doing everything that the plaintiff says you did that was wrong. You're going to file an answer, and you're going to have some denials in there. And if you believe that the plaintiff has violated the law against you within this set of relevant facts, all right, then you can and should file counterclaims. And those are your complaints against the plaintiff, saying, well, you said that I did these things wrong, these complaints against me. I'm making these complaints against you that you violated these laws. So that's all it is. So if you want to look at it as a new lawsuit, you can. I think I've even called it that in the past because somehow it makes it clearer for people. But it's within the same lawsuit. You see the civil number there right below it. It's the same number. And also, on top of that, there's another document that they filed, which is not this long, and it is a motion to dismiss the case, separate and independent from this answer and counterclaims. All right? And we'll get to that if we can never get through this 125-page document before midnight, which I'm hoping for. No, that wasn't at you. That's at the size of the document. I think they did a very good job with this this answer, the counterclaims. I think John has some good lawyers here.
I've got a question too for you. When this gets turned, this got turned in, I think today. When this gets turned in, this is a long document. It has all these little minutia and things you have to click to get more details. Mm-hmm. Whose job is it? Does the judge sit down on weeknights and instead of watching Matlock, he reads this document, or does somebody in the system read it for him? Like, how does that work?
It's unlikely he's read it at all. If he has, it's only because he has a particular interest in it, because there's nothing for him to do yet. The judge really hasn't even entered the scene for this particular case. The judge enters the scene typically when there's something going on between the parties that they're disagreeing about and they need a ruling on it. So far, the lawsuit, the original complaint was filed, and now the answer and counterclaims have been filed, and a motion to dismiss has been filed, but there's still nothing for the judge to do. Now, he could read it if he wants to, or he could wait. And if I were him, I'd probably wait because I'm sure he's got a bunch of other stuff on his plate right now. In fact, one case in particular comes to mind.
When it gets to the courtroom or the point where both sides are going to argue their case, does he then read this, or is it just a matter of this information comes out during the proceedings themselves?
Well, there's a motion to dismiss. This is going to be the first thing. First off, let's get rid of the motion to dismiss. I'll come back to it in a second. Based upon the complaint and the answer, now that these have been filed, this moves the case into what is called the discovery phase, where now the different parties are going to be propounding interrogatories, written interrogatories, and requests for production of documents generally from the other side. And then that's supposed to happen. If there's a hitch or a hang up in there, one side says, no, I'm not going to give you this, or they go beyond the timeline, whatever it might be, then the judge might have to get involved and a motion might have to be filed. But that would be pretty procedural. So then you get into depositions is also part of the discovery phase, where you depose witnesses under oath, et cetera. And once again, generally the judge is not involved in this unless he's called upon to make a decision, a finding of law. It's Judge Robert J. Shelby. We've heard that name. He's been assigned to the case. Okay, so having said that much, did that make it clear? Did that answer your question, Bill?
Sort of. Let's not waste time on it. I can talk to you more off the record. And
did I not do it? I didn't answer the question.
Well, I'm just wanting to know, like, is this basically to give both sides the opportunity to know what the argument is the other side is going to make, so that way when you go into discovery, you know who you need to ask questions of and what kind of information you need to seek, and that the judge only gets involved if this actually gets to the actual proceedings or there's some sort of hang up leading up to those?
Yes. And so the other thing was, you've got it, but now there's a motion to dismiss filed. So the other side is going to have to file a response to the motion to dismiss, and the defendants, who are the ones who filed it, are going to have to schedule it for a hearing, whatever the procedures are down there in that court, to have it heard by the judge. And that's going to be an issue of law, which they're going to be asking Judge Shelby to dismiss this case pre-trial. And I think they got a good shot at it. So anything else? Okay. So let's continue down this. There are the parties. You can see it was filed today. There's an introduction here. By the way, this is the answer, all right? And the answer is basically to respond specifically to, I know that I'm scrolling, by the way. This is all stuff that we're not going to spend a lot of time on, this precatory stuff. You get to plaintiff's alleged facts, plaintiff's alleged trademarks and copyrights, paragraph 13 admitted. So they're looking at paragraph 13 in the complaint, and then saying whether they admit, deny, or have insufficient information, or whatever their answer is to the allegation. So this really is an answer. When the law calls this an answer, it makes sense because it is answering each and every allegation that was made in the complaint by paragraph number. But that's not going to be the interesting part. There's a few interesting parts that come up, but not enough, I think, really to spend a lot of time on, since in 125 pages, there will be a good deal of repetition. Not as bad as I've seen before. Now you get to count one. So responding to count one being made by the church a federal trademark infringement, they're denying. You can see that there, right? So they're going to deny each and every one of the complaints that were made by the church, and then their prayer for relief. And now defendants' affirmative defenses. This is where it's going to get a little more interesting, all right? Their first affirmative defense that they are lodging is failure to state a claim. They're saying the church failed to state a claim, at least with not sufficient detail or facts in order to be permissible. Second affirmative defense, non-infringement. They didn't infringe any copyrights. Third affirmative defense, etc. All of these will come up to later, okay? Seventh affirmative defense, you have to plead your defenses, and that's what they're doing. Okay, 11, 12, 13. You just need one to stick. And the 13th affirmative defense is estoppel. 14th, 15th affirmative defense, as I say, we'll get to all of these in due time. If we read through these, it'll all just be having to be read again. 16th, affirmative defense and reservation of additional defenses. Okay, now defendant's counterclaims. By the way, did you have any questions about that whole thing that I scrolled through? Okay. Nature of the action. Hey, Bill, could you read this? And if we could go off every third paragraph, maybe. Rebecca, is that okay with you? Can you
Yep,
see
I'm
this well
following
enough
on
to
my
read it?
phone so I can see it. Yeah.
Okay, so nature of the action, and it's page 16.
You're going to go ahead and keep scrolling for me so it stays right.
Oh, can you read one and have Rebecca read two?
I'll do that. So, nature of the action. Number one, this is a civil action seeking a declaratory judgment of A, non-infringement of the church's trademark rights, and B, non-infringement of the church's copyright in the works accused in the complaint.
Okay, so the opposite of what the church is asking for, right? And then two, which is interesting. Rebecca, are you there for two?
Yep, I'm here. It says this action also seeks an order directing full or partial cancellation of the church's U.S. trademark registrations on the grounds of fraud on the trademark office, abandonment, and or what is this?
Genericness.
Genericus. Yes, being too generic.
Yes. So the whole thing is this, and what we're going to find out is
Yeah.
that in their complaint, the church says, well, we have copyrights on all of these different names, right? Remember Mormon Handicraft or Mormon Pioneer or Book of Mormon or Book of Mormon Stories, right, Rebecca? We
Yeah.
have all of these, and then they included the documentation for it. And now what this counter claim is doing is saying, you know something? You guys got these under fraud. This is the claim being made, because your entire church and your president is disavowing the use of the word Mormon. And you went during that time period, and they have it all documented in that section. You went to the U.S. Trademark Office, and you did not tell them that, which would be a pretty important fact to include. I mean, when you're there, you're acting in the capacity. It's like it's an ex parte hearing. There is no other side to counter it. There is no buddy who can file an answer to it, because you don't know what's happening if you're out there and you want this Mormon, right, as a trademark. So anyway, they're going in, they're renewing, and they're not telling them that their entire church has disavowed the use of the term that they're asking them to renew. So they're saying, hey, this is fraud, and we want all those trademarks vitiated as well. Any thoughts from you, Bill?
No, I think this goes back to the thing you said at the beginning, which is the church, for whatever reason, its legal team, and I don't expect the 15 have obviously initiated this whole action and have approved it every step of the way, but I'm not sure they're aware of the minutia, but it seems quite obvious that the church's legal representation is leaving a lot of things out. And when you understand the full story, John's essentially saying, if you knew the full story, this shouldn't even be happening.
Right. This is the kind of lawsuit that gets filed when you have more money than common sense. So here's introduction. I'll go with number 3. And then if we can go Bill and Rebecca and around the horn each time. Number 3, no single source, including the church, has the legal right to control the use of the word Mormon. And you next, Bill?
Absolutely. So the next one here is number 4. Mormon is a vast and complex term that millions of people use and have used for over 200 years to identify themselves or others, their upbringings, genealogical roots, cultures, religious beliefs, and traditions, regardless of their affiliation with the corporate institution of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
And Rebecca?
And number 5, Mormon belongs to the public, including members of over 400 different Mormon sects currently existing nationwide that trace their heritage back to the founder of Mormonism, Joseph Smith, and those with varied connections to Mormon history, genealogy, beliefs, and culture.
Over 20 years ago, defendant John Dehlin, as an active member of the church, began the Mormon Stories podcast to help sincere people navigate the journey to answer hard questions relating to the church and Mormonism.
All right. So number 7, right?
Mhm.
Dehlin, a lifelong member of the church, before being excommunicated from the church in 2015 due to the content of his Mormon Stories podcast, continues today to self-identify as Mormon.
And number 8, Mormon Stories, believed to be the longest running active podcast in the world, has achieved unparalleled renown in this genre, with hundreds of millions of views and tens of millions of hours watched, as well as being featured on national news and media outlets like ABC Good Morning America, New York Times, HBO, and the Washington Post over the past 20 years.
Since the podcast's inception, officials at the highest level of the church have been aware of Dehlin and Mormon Stories podcast, without one suggesting any intellectual property concerns regarding the name of the podcast, its logos, or any aspect of its branding.
Number 10, the church's awareness includes multiple direct interactions, such as letters and lunch meetings with apostles of the church and extensive research work in collaboration with the church's chief historians under the approval of the church's apostolic leadership.
So they're going to devote a section to all the contacts the church has had with John Dehlin. I'd forgotten some of them, but of course they immediately came to my mind with all the statistics. Remember the survey that he did back in 2011, I think?
Yep.
About why people leave? And that went all the way up to church leadership, and they all knew he had a hand in it, and he had meetings with different people in church leadership. So all of this is just to show and demonstrate factually that the church knew perfectly well about John Dehlin and Mormon Stories podcast. They can't say it was happening over here in some remote corner of the bloggernacle where we never saw him nor had any reason to look. Okay? So his use of their word and trademarks and copyrights, as they're alleging, is something that they knew about but did not act on. And that's the crux, right? The churches, and you just read that, number 10, didn't you?
Yeah. So now it's me, 11, I think. I will say the more people...
This
What was that?
This is I.
Oh, aren't I after Bill, number 11?
I think I am.
Oh,
Or are
you are?
you? I have no idea. You just go. You take 11 and 12, would you?
I think I go after Bill. Yeah, I think that's it. And I was going to say that the Tribune just texted me and said the story
Yeah.
is posted about, the entire countersuit. So that'll be interesting. Go over to the Tribune and check it. They just
Oh, my
barely put that
God.
out. Breaking news. That's right. I wonder who sent that to them. All right. Number 11. Despite the church's knowledge of and extensive and personal interactions with defendants for 2 full decades, the church never once raised trademark or other intellectual property objections.
Like I just said, right.
And
Instead, I'm sorry, what, Rebecca?
go ahead.
Okay. Instead, in 2018, the church publicly and expressly abandoned, to the extent it owned any rights in Mormon, which defendants do not concede, the very word Mormon that it now claims ownership and control of and sues to protect. So here's the abandonment claim. This is going to be what's going to rule this case. There's 2 things that are going to rule this case. One, that it's been 20 years that John Dehlin's been doing Mormon Stories and the church hasn't done diddly about it or made one complaint. And the second is that they affirmatively abandoned the term in 2018. Either one of those would win this case for John Dehlin. Both of them together, insurmountable in my opinion. What do you 2 think?
I think that President Nelson has really messed things up for the current leadership and the current church. And I wonder if President Oaks, sitting there in the second chair the whole time, was kind of shaking his head going, oh, gosh, dang. Because they've literally opened a Pandora's box. As they are pointing that finger at John and the trademark, their other fingers are pointing back at them, and they can use that in this whole scenario. So, yeah.
You know what Oaks was doing? Oaks was sending the lawyers behind Nelson's back and without Nelson's knowledge to go to the U.S. Patent Office and renew their patents for the Mormon words.
That makes
That's
sense.
what I think he was doing.
That's what he would be doing. Yeah.
Bill, what are your thoughts?
So we obviously have the 2 reasons, right? The one is that Mormon is a general term that describes anybody coming out of the Restoration movement, doesn't specifically tie into only the LDS Church, anybody that ties into Joseph Smith. We also showed this last week on Mormonism Live. I think it was Mormonism Live, where we had it was either the Shakers or one of the other groups, and they used Latter Day in some of their language as well. not necessarily the word Mormon, but there's all these terms that get used in multiple places, and Mormon, for one, has been used in lots of areas. The other argument too is that they've abandoned the word, but it goes further than that. I mean, the church is, again, I want to point this question to you, which is, you pointed out this time limit thing, that they only had so much time to deal with it. Is there some sort of legal understanding that the moment you become aware of something, you really only have so much time to deal with it? Or can somebody sit idly by, watch someone else use their trademark, and then show up a decade later and go, hey, yes, I knew 10 years ago, but I finally got around to doing something about it? Does time really play a part in this?
Yes, absolutely. It's a critical factor. Now, to the day is not necessarily known, and they cite to some case law in their briefing. One of the things that you do when there's a time factor, but it's not expressed, well, let me go back to the one that is expressed. There are some courts, this is a federal court, I think it's in the 10th Circuit. There are some courts that have looked at this specifically as to how long do you sit on your rights before you lose them and you abandon them for trademark or copyright law, since the statute presumably does not put it there, otherwise that would govern. And some have said the obvious thing, the clear thing, the thing that's easy to understand thing, which is that we're going to make it the same as what the statute of limitations would be for filing a civil suit for this kind of thing, which is generally 3 years, or at least it was in the district that they were looking at. And so the decisions in that district. So 3 years, if it's beyond 3 years, okay, you've slept too long and you've lost your trademark, as long as the other elements of it fit. But then there are other districts and other courts that look at it and they don't come to that decision. They just say, well, it's been 12 years. And this is a certain case that they quote in support of their position. The defendants do. John Dehlin does here. It's been 12 years. And whatever the right amount is, that's too long. So you slept on it for 12 years. That's too long without having to make a decision as to what's right. And then what you end up having to do in these cases is you have to go back and you have to look at the case law, what they decided was too long or not long enough, and then put your case against it and try and argue that yours is more like the case you want it to be like and less like the case you don't want it to be like. In this case, it's obviously favorable since 12 years is much shorter than 20 years. And if 12 years is too long, then 20 years must be.
There are so many discrepancies in how the church's legal representation is approaching this case. As you pointed out earlier, things they're withholding, things they're not telling in an accurate way, things that they're saying that they were there first when John can demonstrate he was there for design issues, for instance. He was there first. It makes me wonder, when we tried to get a trademark on Radio Free Mormon and on Mormon Discussions, and the church put the kibosh on that, we went in and we're looking at trademarks, and everybody, it's 30 out of 31 people who tried to use the word Mormon in a trademark had to abandon it. The church put pressure on, threatened to sue them, and everybody backed down. I have a hunch, and I'd love to know your 2 cents, you two, but I have a hunch that that's what the church expected here on some level, was that John would just back down, change everything, lose his branding, rather than go into court. And so they felt like they could just put anything and everything just to scare the hell out of him, when in reality, they actually made it, I think, a much bigger uphill battle for themselves.
Couldn't see that coming. Could we, Rebecca?
I think that describes mediation, the way John describes it, that, it was not a reasonable back and forth and people making concessions. It was exactly what you described, Bill. But I was going to ask you, RFM, so there's organically kind of moving away from a trademark. We've seen companies that do that. And then there's actively campaigning against a trademark, right? Which is what we have here. I can't think of any other trademark where they instructed their user base, don't ever use this. And I really hope, I'm so glad we have a use now for all of our chats. And probably everybody who's listening here has texts from people that when you dare to accidentally say the word Mormon, some member of the church will write back, "We are not Mormon. We do not use that." How much overwhelming evidence is there, not just institutionally, but from the members or users themselves who are telling everyone, we have been told we do not say this anymore. This is not us. It's everywhere. I'd be happy to go through all of my chats and point out the times where people lambasted me for using the word Mormon. It's everywhere. Wouldn't you agree?
Yep. So,
I think there's another side of the coin there too, which is like the video we played last week. There have been moments, I remember this distinctly. There have been moments where the church, in instructing its members, have tried to parse that out and say, like, hey, it's one thing if people who are members of the church identify themselves as Mormon, but when people are referring to the church, they should use the full name of the church. But when you give permission for individual people to use that term to describe themselves, you are in a sense saying, I don't own that. Anyone out there who wants to call themselves Mormon can do so. And when you refer to us, the entity, we don't want the word Mormon. We want you to use the full name of the church. And so on the side of who they're saying can use it, and on the side of telling their members not to use it when referring to the system or the institution, I think both of those are things that weaken their argument in its totality.
yes, and it occurs to me that when this lawsuit was filed, there was a lot of hubbub, and it should be, that here's the church that was disavowing the name Mormon now suing to get use of it, exclusive use of it, which is really what this lawsuit is about. The thing is that now we know they've been doing this all along. Ever since President Nelson came out and disavowed the use of the word Mormon, and everything that we've heard about it and everything the church has done, which has been substantial and which is documented in this answer, was going on at the same time as the church is going to the U.S. Copyright Office and renewing Mormon, Mormon, Mormon.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that's following the prophet. It wasn't when I joined the church in 1978. Oh, and it also occurs to me, I think the burden is put on the person who does have a trademark to keep up to date on the applications and stuff in order to know what's going on. That's where you find out. That's the center point of information, I imagine. All right. So did we read 18 or 12? I read 12.
Bill's up.
13.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'll just go to you to find out who's up.
All right. So number 13, following this mandate, the church took dramatic measures for a period of years to omit all signs of Mormon from its official branding and trademark uses by, among other things, renaming the Mormon Tabernacle Choir to the Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square. Why did they do that? Because they don't want Mormon in the name. B, renaming its Mormon channel to the Latter-day Saints channel, renaming its Mormon messages to inspirational messages, renaming over 1,000 products that bore the word Mormon, updating 300 web-based applications, and acquiring 800 domain names to purge Mormon from its vernacular and web presence, eliminating the entire website at www.mormon.org and simply redirecting the domain to one of its web pages located at churchofjesuschrist.org, and issuing a style guide that is still in force today, explaining that Mormon is simply an adjective or proper name, not a brand, eliminating all use of the term Mormon as an identifier of the church, and instructing the media and public to stop calling the church Mormon and to stop referring to its members as Mormons.
See why I think this is a good law firm for John? That was pretty powerful. What did you think, Rebecca?
No, that was amazing. And I think, in simple terms, you could say, and instructing your members to be super annoying and shut people down whenever they accidentally use the word Mormon. How many conversations have been stopped? I'm sure people can agree where you say, oh yeah, when I was more, we are not more. I mean, they are offended, like you just said the worst thing to them. So, but I have noticed, and we've talked about this on the newscast, that word is coming back. Jasmine is using it in print and verbally. People are using it. I think that they realize, oh crap, we better tell our members to start using this if we're going to be involved in this lawsuit. So everybody look at that, because I'm seeing it.
Jasmine, it's too late. President Nelson screwed it all up for you.
He kind of did. He and his lighted pen got the wrong message. I don't know.
Hey, Rebecca, can you read 14? It's a great one. It's a snarky
14, here we go. Number 14, the explicit and sweeping abandonment, however, did not extend to its averment. Sorry, I can't read that.
Statement,
yes, made to the the United States Patent and Trademark Office, known as the USPTO, to suspiciously maintain federal registration for the abandoned marks. Yeah,
That's
you
what they're
can't
saying.
use
They
it, but
abandoned it
we have it.
They abandoned it completely, except when they were talking to the patent office.
Right. No one else can have it, but we wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot lighted pen.
15, even as the church spent years publicly dismantling every trace of Mormon from its branding, it simultaneously submitted sworn declarations to the Patent Office, the Trademark and Patent Office, falsely representing the true nature of the church's ongoing trademark use or lack thereof regarding the term Mormon. Bill, paragraph 16.
Yes. In November of 2025, more than 20 years after the Mormon Stories podcast launched, and nearly 3 years after defendants adopted the blue logo of which the church complains, the church raised trademark or copyright concerns to the defendants for the very first time.
Wow. 17. Defendants responded within 24 hours, voluntarily making numerous changes in the spirit of good faith cooperation, despite believing that the church's claims were unfounded.
Defendants' efforts to resolve, and defendant John Dehlin, efforts to resolve the church's concerns cooperatively included changing the color of the Mormon Stories logo, changing the font, ceasing use of defendant's long-standing light rays design, adding a reference to Dr. John Dehlin near the logo, removing all copyrighted images that the church identified, and adopting a disclaimer across every page of defendant's website and the podcast descriptions on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple, stating that Mormon Stories, this is the quote, Mormon Stories is not affiliated with, endorsed, or sponsored by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, period, end of quote. But this was not good enough for the Mormon Church, you understand. What, Rebecca? Were you going to say
I'm
something?
just laughing because first I'm coughing, then I'm laughing. I'm just thinking about some of the examples from the church's complaint. Shot them in the foot too, because they had examples of people that said, yeah, I went to Mormon Stories. I was confused for 10 seconds. Then I realized it had nothing to do with the LDS Church. That was their evidence in their claim. Sure, someone might go, is this Mormon? The people themselves, the members themselves said within a few seconds, I knew it was not. And that's not even with all of these changes that John and his team made voluntarily.
Well, there's a segment of the pleadings that are given over to ferreting out that very claim and showing that in instance after instance, I think the majority of instances, they can identify these comments were not made the way the church represented them to be made, and actually were made in different fora and more recently than the church admitted to. See, this is also one of the things they bring up. The church makes all these claims. Let me back up for a second and say that I think it's really clear to most of us. And, I'm trying to be as objective as possible, which is pretty good given my career. And I think this is a really bad case for the church. I just do. And the more I learn about it, the worse it gets for the church. But that's because there's a timeline that's involved. And when certain things happened is, of course, critical to understanding a timeline and why it is that the church's case is so bad for the church and why John Dehlin's case is so good. When the church filed its complaint, it basically omitted any reference to time because it hurt it and just made sweeping allegations as if time were not a factor and as if these things had always been this way. And if the church had always been doing things this way since Adam and Eve walked out of the garden, or that John Dehlin has been violating their copyrights forever because they didn't put time in. And they mention that in these pleadings too. And that's one of the bases for I think it's the motion to dismiss. It may be in the answer as well. Okay, let's go ahead and see what the next thing is. Is it 19? And who?
19. Is it almost like, if I can just say this, is it almost like the church in their complaint never imagined that John would have a lawyer that would do lawyer things back to them? I mean, that's kind of what it seems like to me.
I'm convinced that these lawyers don't know what lawyer things look like.
That's what I'm saying. I know I was being funny when I said that, but did they not think that a professional would go through their complaint and rip it to shreds with actual facts and time and evidence? It just seems so strange.
Kurt and McConkie, it's like they're pretending to be lawyers.
That's it.
Okay, number 19. Is that you, Bill?
It is number 19. Even as evidenced by the church's own asserted examples of alleged consumer confusion in the complaint, no consumers are actually or likely to be confused as to the source of the Mormon Stories podcast.
And of course, you remember that that's the gravamen of the complaint is that the trademark violation is causing your customers to go somewhere else, thinking that that other person is you, right? Which is weird in the circumstance. But we know that because we're involved in it. And this is setting it out there that there's no consumer confusion in the complaint. No consumers are likely to be confused as to the source of John Dehlin's podcast. And then it goes to 20, and that's you, right, Rebecca?
Can I say something about that really quick? Right. If we were to take 1,000 random active faithful Mormons and we were to say, what has your church taught you about people referring to you as Mormon, or if you see the word Mormon out there, and 90-something% of them would say, Mormon, when someone uses that term, my church has taught me to see that as derogatory towards me or my religious system. In other words, you can't have consumer confusion when you've made it clear as an institution that that word is a signal to you, the believer, that this is not the Mormon church, because we don't use the word Mormon. The church has instructed all of us that if we see the word Mormon used, we should have red flags going up. Our radar should be hypersensitive, and we should correct people and let them know that that's not the proper name of the church. We're not to use that. I've had people say that's like using the N-word. Yes. Of course it's not, because you can say Mormon, you can't say the N-word. So it's so ridiculous. They want to have their cake and eat it too in a real legal sense.
They want to have new ways of choosing to be offended.
You can always depend on being offended. That was a slogan I grew up with. So, and I've always said this, that by saying we are Mormon Stories, every Mormon should know that's a satanic channel. You need to go as far away from that instantly as you can, because it's called Mormon. But I do wonder, remember what Patrick Mason, I believe it was, said in a statement. I remember copying it, making some kind of meme about it, where he said, perhaps it's more the person the missionary will meet. And maybe the missionary meets a person who's watched Mormon Stories. And shouldn't we give those people a fair shake without influencing them from seeing Mormon Stories? So are they worried about people who are not LDS, who are just out in the world and come across Mormon Stories and think, oh, this will tell me about the Mormon church, and maybe someday I'll meet the missionaries? Is that something they're worried about?
I would think that would have to be their position, because as Bill said, everybody in the church knows good and well that Mormon is, it's not something that's good. It's a victory for Satan, and it should not be used. So it can only be talking, really, logically speaking, reasonably, about non-members, and those would be the ones that the church wants to baptize, probably.
Yeah, and maybe they blame Mormon Stories, because I think when missionaries go to the door, they will encounter people who do know things about Mormonism from the internet, right? Maybe the church thinks it's only from Mormon Stories.
Well, I think all I'm going to do is distinguish what the lawsuit says from what the church really thinks. And I don't think the church cares about that at all. I think what the church cares about is shutting John Dehlin up in any way they can, and hampering him and hamstringing him.
Yeah, that's it. I'm just trying to get into what they think they're saying they care about, making us to think that. So, okay, let's go to number 20. The church's response to the defendant's gestures of extraordinary and voluntary amenability was to file this lawsuit and issue a false and misleading press release depicting the defendants as uncooperative and deceptive. There is nothing worse than that statement. That was a bold-faced lie.
By the way, it does, and they're going to go into that in their answer. It doesn't appear that their counterclaim is going to be going after them for any damages. Damages would be tough to prove, at least. In other words, what damages did John Dehlin and Open Stories suffer because of the allegedly misleading church statement? That's the question. So, but they're putting it in here, and it's important to show how disingenuous the church has been all the way along this issue.
Yeah. And the statement basically said, we tried, we went into mediation with good faith, and John wouldn't budge or do anything. That's basically what the statement said. And that is completely not true. As he said, within 24 hours, he and his team made all of the reasonable changes, not the unreasonable ones, because no podcaster or social media presence would be able to do those without destroying their entire channel.
Okay, so this is the last paragraph in this section. 21, because the church is a multi-billion-dollar religious institution with unlimited resources to wield in its enforcement efforts, the very existence of the present lawsuits alone has the potential to ultimately silence defendants John Dehlin through attrition and thereby create a chilling effect for other church critics and questioners who, like defendants, engage in constitutionally protected speech about Mormonism. And that's really stripping the veil back and calling what's going on here, what's going on, because this is what the church is doing. Any comments about that paragraph or any of the other paragraphs, Bill and then Rebecca?
Just that, we're one of those groups of church critics, and it's definitely going to be interesting to watch this play out. I'm invested.
Rebecca?
And Bill and I were talking before you jumped on RFM, and I think, Bill, that your analogy, your example that you gave about Catholicism was really good. It really, I think, helped clarify exactly what they're saying. Maybe you could say that again. I thought that was really good.
Remind me of what I said about Catholicism.
You basically said, boy, I have to do all the work around here. You basically said that if somebody had a channel said church watching Catholic Church abuse, and you shared stories about abuse in the Catholic Church, and then the Catholic Church said, you no longer have the right to use the word Catholic, and we're taking that out of all your SEO. You can never say it's the Catholic Church. You can't share these stories talking about Catholicism. That's what's happening here, basically, that you silence someone who has the right to bring these kinds of things forward.
Bill, do you know why you're having trouble remembering that?
Because I'm not the one who said that.
Because I said it, Rebecca.
Oh, gosh. I talk to both of you all the time. I'm sorry. My mind's a jumble. So, okay. Now you
Apparently
stated
our
over
voices are
again.
very similar, too.
You stated over again, RFM, because you said it so much better, but it was great to cut through it all.
No. It will stand as you have said it. We've got too much to get through. Thank you so much for lionizing me in Bill's name.
That's what you're both amazing. Either one of you could have said it.
Okay. So then it goes to parties. Parties bores us. Okay. Talking about the different parties. It's important for jurisdiction and venue, which is there. And then facts. Now we get to some more interesting stuff. We're going to read all of this Dehlin and Mormon Stories podcast under facts. This is in the answer. It's under subsection A. And then you'll notice that the paragraph numbers continue on uninterrupted. So you don't have to go A1 or A3 or whatever, just 2930, wherever it falls, it falls. So then it talks about where John Dehlin was born, being raised as a member of the church, serving his 2-year mission. And then on February 11th, 1992, Dehlin wrote a letter to Dallin H. Oaks, currently president of the church, but at the time a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles for the church, the QTs, expressing concern about the corruption he experienced on his mission. I didn't remember he'd written to Dallin Oaks about that. By the way, once again, what this is doing, as well as showing the facts, is showing all the connections that John has had with the apostles since an early time. This is the summer of 1992. Okay. This is way before John Dehlin has started Mormon Stories. Okay. So what they're doing is laying out the facts that the church can't say, oh, we didn't know about them. We didn't know about John Dehlin. Can you read this? Is it you next? And then Rebecca, I think it is. I almost said verse. Paragraph 32, Bill.
Yep. So 32. In the summer of 1992, Apostle Oaks called Dehlin while he was completing a BYU internship in Washington, D.C., thanked him for his letter, and promised to follow up regarding the concerns Dehlin expressed about problematic missionary practices. I think this was baseball baptisms. Yeah.
I think so. 33, Rebecca.
He called him, like on the phone, like you could actually speak to somebody in the Q15. That's incredible.
Apparently, if they call you.
I'm just saying that's amazing. I know how much the Fairview mayor is trying to get a hold of the Q15. No one's calling him. All right, 33. On June 8th, 1992, Apostle Oakes wrote Dehlin to inform him that he shared Dehlin's letter with the full quorum of the 12 to help improve LDS missionary practices. A copy of this letter is inserted below.
Well, look at what we got here.
Amazing.
Look, a letterhead, Rebecca. There's a letterhead on this letter. See,
I see it. It must be real.
that's how you know it's official. It's dated June 8th, 1992. And
By the way, the D in day is capitalized. So even at church headquarters, somebody screwed the pooch.
no. This is because they're all capitalized.
I see that. I'm sorry.
Even so.
I'm sure that there must have been a discussion and a revelation received in order to iron that out, though. How do we hyphenate and capitalize when it's all caps?
Oh, gosh.
Good point. Mr. John Dehlin in Huntsville, Texas, back in 1992. I think he's moved since then. Wow. Do you want to read this, Rebecca? It looks like it's signed by
Sure.
Dallas Oakes.
Yeah, again, I'm just stunned that they're actually reaching back and writing to people. It just does not happen.
I'm sure they're wishing they hadn't now.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Because here it is. It says, "Dear Brother Dehlin, I write to report what was done with your memo of February 11th, 1992. Following our phone conversation, I copied the memo and shared it with the members of the Council of the 12. What happens now is up to them. As I advised you on the telephone, it is quite possible that some of them would hand it to someone in a church department or take steps on their own to investigate this matter. I think it quite likely that your memo may be of assistance in the instruction given at the forthcoming Mission President's Seminar. Thank
Wow.
you for sharing this very valuable information." See, John has valuable information. Sincerely, and there it is signed, Dehlin H. Oakes, and with a CC to Professor F. Lamond Tullis. So
I
he
wanna hear
basically
what-
says, I gave it to him and they might actually do something with it. So that's very encouraging.
Well, right. And this is all the contacts now. Under the theory that we have, and which I think is probably correct, which is that Dehlin has been boiling on this at a low boil for a
Yes.
long time against John Dehlin, and that he gave the go-ahead for the lawyers, the attack lawyers, to go after John Dehlin. It does my heart good to see evidence signed by Dehlin Oakes being used in the answer to ram it up his arse.
Wow.
Does that do your soul good, Bill?
Anytime that the quorum of the 12 or the first presidency is getting criticized for mistakes that they make or bad attitudes or irresponsible handling of history or fragile people, I think it's well deserved.
I guarantee you the lawyers took a special delight in including this.
And look at this. Think of it this way. John Dehlin pointed out an issue going on within the church. And at that time, the apostles said, "Oh, thank you. You know what? I'm going to make note of this and make others aware. Maybe we can make some changes." How is this different from what John does today on his podcast, where he interviews people? They shine a spotlight on things happening within the church where people could do better. He's doing the same thing. It's the institution has changed how they react to it.
Very good. On June 25th, 1992, Apostle Oakes, this is even before the September 6th, Apostle Oakes sent Dehlin a copy of a talk he gave that month to outgoing church mission presidents addressing some of Dehlin's concerns. A copy of the note from Apostle Oakes is inserted below. Man, I had no idea they were so chummy. Can you read this little note, Bill?
Sure. Let's see here. To John P. Dehlin, for your information, I am sending you a copy of the talk I gave at the Mission President's Seminar this week. Dehlin H. Oakes. By the way, that card looks very familiar to the one I've got framed from Elder Holland telling Marlon Jensen to reach out to me. So that looks like the common stock that they use to send messages out as such.
No letterhead. No letterhead there. Interesting. Okay, so here's the note. And then in 1993, Dehlin graduated summa cum laude from Brigham Young University with a degree in political science. I had no idea he was that smart. Did you know that, Rebecca?
Oh, I knew that. Everybody knows that. Come on.
Okay. Is summa cum laude, is that smarter than cum laude, or is it the other way around? I always forget. Obviously, because I never graduated with either.
It just means he was pretty dang bitchin'
Okay.
academically.
Okay. Well, one of them is better than the other. That's all I know. On January 9th, but they're both good. On January 9th, 2002, Apostle Oak sent Dehlin a letter acknowledging the positive impact his letter had on worldwide church missionary practices. My gosh, he was like on a GA track. Can you, is this Rebecca now?
I think so. I can read it. Yes. I'm just really stunned that they're continuing this dialogue, this interaction, and they're taking his suggestions to heart. I mean, they do not contact or get back to anybody now, no matter who they are.
No,
Dear
because
brother,
we've learned if Dehlin Oaks could
Yeah.
see the future, he never would have done this.
That's right. He would have silenced John then right away. So it says, Dear brother Dehlin, on my flight to Asia, from which I have just returned, you left me a letter while I was sleeping. What does that mean? Since I did not get a chance to respond on the plane, hurrying to the next flight, I use this means to respond and to thank you for the gracious message. I remember your letter very well. It was one of great concern to me and alerted me to conditions I needed to understand, as do all of John's podcasts. Yes.
Were they on the same airplane?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, this is it's 2002.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah, there was email then, right? Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
that's what he means.
But again, he's saying, thank you. You're bringing up issues that no one else has told me about. And you, John Dehlin, are shining a spotlight. And he's
Okay.
receptive here. I don't know what happened. All right. That I understand, though my capacity to correct them at that point was very limited. Ever since that time, I have never spoken to missionaries without stressing the fact that we want real conversions and that they should not consider their success to be linked to the exercise of agency of others. I believe mission presidents get into trouble when they give missionaries goals for baptisms dependent on the agency of the investigators rather than goals for what the missionary can do himself or herself, the age-old problem here. I was glad to know that our communications had been helpful to you and that you are happily married and the father of 3 beautiful daughters and currently serving as a seminary teacher in the Bellevue, Washington state. Thanks again for the work you are doing with BYU's business school. You have my very best wishes. Sincerely. And then that super flowy, circly signature that I can hardly even look at without getting dizzy. Dehlin H. Oaks. This is just incredible to me. I bet they put like an asterisk by his name and said, this guy is a guy to watch. Like, this guy is good. I bet they did.
There are some handwriting experts that would suggest that the loopier the signature, the more prone to fraud.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the loopier the person.
Have you not heard that?
No, I
I
haven't.
thought everybody knew that. The loopier,
did
that's
not
why
know
I
that.
intentionally signed my name very loopily.
Loops.
What do you think
Wow.
about this, Bill? Did you realize that I mean, John was in so tight with the Oakster?
I'll tell you, Dehlin goes out of his way on multiple occasions to reach out to John,
Yeah.
to update him on the situation, to let him know that it meant something to him, that he did something about it, that he's glad it impacted John, his response, I mean. And I think it'd be hard to argue that Dehlin Oaks doesn't know who John Dehlin is all through time from that point forward.
I agree. So let's just pop over these little facts, okay? 2007, John gets his master's degree. 2015, he gets his PhD. Following undergraduate studies, Dehlin works in software field up in Washington State. Now, in the early 2000s, while working for Microsoft, Dehlin experienced a crisis of faith due to some of the difficult and generally unknown aspects of the church's history and policies. And they're generally unknown because the church wants to keep it that way. Dehlin discovered facts previously unknown to him about the church's history, beliefs, and practices that he felt the church hid from him throughout his life. Now, if we can go 41 and go to Bill and then do the rotation again.
Yeah, 41. Dehlin struggled with his doubts, but found reasons to remain an active member of the church.
Dehlin realized that the internet was growing rapidly and expanding in such a way that more and more people would be exposed to the problematic and complicated aspects of the lesser-known history, practices, and doctrines of the church, which he believed can cause significant confusion and distress, especially to lifelong members of the church like Dehlin. Dehlin wanted to help people in the church to process such things in healthy and positive ways as he had been trying to do himself.
In 2005, Dehlin launched the Mormon Stories podcast and blog with the goal of creating a supportive space for people to discuss and process complicated stories from the church's history, as well as share their own stories about what being Mormon means or has meant to them. And I'll just say Dehlin registered the mormonstories.org domain on July 10th, 2005. So that's a very important date, obviously. 2005 is the year. And then going on with Bill.
Yeah, Dehlin's first Mormon Stories blog entry and podcast discussed Dehlin's experience as a church missionary in Guatemala, which he conveyed to Apostle Oaks as explained above, and were posted on September 4th, 2005, using the blue background shown below.
There it
Hey,
is.
look at that blue background. Wait a second. I think John's been using blue for a long time.
2 decades. 2 decades of blue.
Oh, that's so spot on because it was Oaks who said that too.
Yeah.
Okay, so there it is. That's what it looked like, folks. Mormon Stories podcast, number 001, license to podcast. Bad baptisms, my mission experience in Guatemala. And now, is this you, I think, Rebecca, 46?
I think it's me. Yeah. And I have to say that he did start out to help people and keep them in the church. My co-host Landon on Mormon Stories told his story of not having anywhere to turn, facing truth claims, being confused. His wife said to him back in the day, there's this Mormon Stories. You can go on there and it'll help you stay in the church. It'll help you understand things. He looked it up, and this was a few years later, and discovered that John had been excommunicated. So my co-host is like, oh, well, I guess that's my trajectory. There's no hope. But initially, people went there. So to try to,
I think he started a podcast or group called Stay Mormon.
Yep. That was the whole point. It was to stay in. So, okay, are we on 46? No, we're on
40. Can you do 47 too?
7. The first Mormon Story video podcast was titled A Mormon Story on Black People and Racism, and was posted on the Mormon Stories YouTube page more than 20 years ago on the Ides of March 15th, 2006.
Okay, so that's the first video podcast.
Yep.
Is 2006, but the first introduction of Mormon Stories on that blue was 2005 because it wasn't a podcast yet, or at least not a video podcast. The Mormon Stories Facebook page was created in 2009. We don't really need the exact dates. The years are really all that's important. A screen capture of the Facebook page from 2010 is depicted below, including a Mormon Stories podcast logo using Mormon-themed images to illustrate the subject matter of the podcast. And this is all a way of saying we've been doing this a long time. And what's the holdup, Ben? Why haven't you said anything about it? You knew about it. You knew about me. You knew about my podcast. And if you didn't, you should have known under the law. And I've been doing all the stuff you're complaining about now since 2010. Look, there's a picture of Joseph Smith. Look, there's a picture of the temple. Look, there's a picture of Gordon B. Hinckley. These are all church copyrighted pictures. And yet
the
he's been
church was
using
not
them without
blue.
permission.
The church was not blue at that time, was it? As far as the logo, it was that orangey kind of puffy lettering, wasn't it?
I cannot remember exactly what the church's was.
Right. I don't think it was blue 20 years ago.
But I will tell you that the fact that this has been blue for 20 years, I can't say continuously. I'm not sure that is a given. But all that blue stuff and all that, what is it called? The light, the daylight or the light rays, the light rays logo.
Sort of a shading. Yeah.
All that's BS. What the church is after is Mormon.
Yep.
That's my take. They're just trying to dress it up to make it look respectable. Okay. So there's that. As early as April 2011, Dehlin began using a gold Mormon Stories logo. Okay, so that was 2011. He did the gold Mormon Stories logo. That's how I came to know him. With a light rays design in connection with the podcast as shown below in a 2011 screen capture of the mormonstories.org website. So this is what it used to look like. There it is over there. See that?
Yeah.
Okay. And Bill, can you read paragraph 50 for us?
Yeah, in January of 2011, Dehlin formed the Open Stories Foundation as a nonprofit entity with the mission of exploring Mormonism through stories. OSF was formed to operate the Mormon Stories podcast and other Mormon-themed podcasts. From the beginning, OSF's website stated that the Open Stories Foundation is a secularly based organization with no affiliation to the LDS Church. A portion,
That's
yes, please.
important. From the very beginning, Open Story Foundation website stated that OSF is a secularly based organization with no affiliation to the LDS Church. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it finishes there. A portion of the OSF website homepage from April 5th, 2012 is depicted below.
Okay, so there's the picture. It says Open Stories Foundation. Under About, you can see the part circled in red where it does say we are a secularly based organization with no affiliation to the LDS Church. Wow. You see, this really comes into play when you talk about the complaint the church has made, and especially in its press release, Getting It Right, where they accused John Dehlin of the church asking him to put up a disclaimer and his refusing, as if that were all there were to the story, and as if, among many other pertinent parts, they didn't have it on there from the beginning in 2012 with the Open Stories Foundation. Okay. Is this you, Rebecca?
I think so. Are we on 51?
Yes.
Yes. Well, and again, this disclaimer is where it belongs, in the about or the show notes. What the church is asking is that the disclaimer is on the banner, that the disclaimer is verbally said. Hi, welcome to Mormon Stories. We are not affiliated. And every 15 minutes repeated. It belongs exactly where they put it here in the show notes. You can find out what kind of a program you're watching. So yeah, completely unreasonable. 51.
The church does have delusions of grandeur.
Yeah. I don't know how they could ask. I would think that any podcaster anywhere would take note of this whole scenario and be concerned and think, could somebody come after my podcast and my right to speak out against whatever they're talking about, whatever topic? I think this transcends religion. I think anybody who wants to speak out and have the right to do it should take note of this. All right. I'm on a soapbox like every time I open my mouth here. 51. The OSF website continues to state that it is a secular organization with no affiliation to any church. And it even says it has no intention of becoming a church if you read that red circled area.
I'm sorry. Did you want to go to 52 since 51 was kind of short?
Sure. Why not? Shortly after forming OSF, the About page of the Mormon Stories website was created to include similar statements, specifically that Mormon Stories is a secular organization with no affiliation to the LDS Church. A screenshot of this page from April of 2012 is depicted below. And
So
again,
the
that's
first
where
one-
yeah.
So the first one is from the OSF website. The second is from the MS, the Mormon Stories website. Two different websites, both with the same disclaimer. And it says the same thing, same language as I read before. Okay. Then 53. Over the years, the specific content on the About page of the Mormon Stories website has changed, but that content has never suggested. So apparently it was deleted at some points, is what I'm weaning from that. Didn't always have that specific disclaimer. But it says, but that content has never suggested that defendants or the Mormon Stories podcast has any affiliation with or sponsorship from the church. If it had been continual, this is where they would have said it. Bill, 54.
54. For years and continuing today, the Mormon Stories About page and the description of every episode of the podcast has identified the podcast affiliation with the Open Stories Foundation.
Okay. Rebecca, 55.
Yep, 55. Any use by the defendants of Mormon and other images pertaining to the church has been for the purpose of describing in good faith the nature and content of the defendant's podcast and associated services, which include identifying, describing, referring to, commenting upon, or otherwise truthfully referencing Mormon culture, history, and tradition, as well as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, other Mormon sects, and people who identify in any way with the Mormon religious and cultural traditions. The use of the word Mormon was and is reasonably necessary to identify and describe the subject matter of the defendant's podcast and associated services. I feel like copying that and putting it on my own podcast because that's exactly right. We all use our materials in that way as we comment on Mormonism.
Very good. Anything from you, Bill?
Nope.
Okay, under 54, which I'd read before, I think what they're saying is, look, here's the Mormon Stories webpage. It hasn't always had the disclaimer. Here's the Open Stories Foundation, which was created earlier, the webpage, which does have the disclaimer. And Mormon Stories, even if it hasn't always had the disclaimer, has always referenced that it's part of Open Stories. So it's a reference back to that website, which has the disclaimer. That's what I'm getting out of paragraph 54. All right. Since 2024 and continuing today, the About page from the MormonStories.org website provides a history of the Mormon Stories podcast. So that's just 2 years, right? And Dehlin's excommunication from the church, making it abundantly clear that there is no formal, official, or informal affiliation between the Mormon Stories podcast and the church. Okay, now notice what this answer is doing, is giving dates, specific dates when things happen. They are setting out the timeline to show the lie that the church is trying to basically perpetrate upon the court and the public and its membership. And that's what the value of this timeline is. So even though it's not as old as the other ones, what it's saying is that 2024, way before the church evinced any concern about it by starting negotiations with John Dehlin back in November of last year, 2025. Since 2025, this has been in the About page, okay, talking about John Dehlin's excommunication from the church. Yeah, that should be a clue that he's not claiming to speak for the Mormon church. Bill, number 57. Oh, with the light rays.
57. In 2007, several years before the church first used what it refers to as its light rays design, Dehlin launched the Mormon Matters podcast at mormonmatters.org to explore current events and pop culture relating to Mormonism. A screen capture from the 2007 Mormon Matters homepage using a blue background with light ray design features is shown below.
And what I hear from people who are into this at the relevant time periods is that this is something that, was it Microsoft? It was just one of their standard things that they offered to subscribers.
Like a template. Yeah.
Yeah.
To me, that closes the case right there. Look, he was using the rays long before the church was. There they are.
If anything, the other side's copying off of them.
That's right. And Disney.
Well, yes. Yes, I think everybody's just using what Mormon Stories has to offer. And now at this late date, the Mormon church is trying to use it to, what do you do? Shoehorn this in as if it's a relevant fact in their lawsuit against John Dehlin. And what the answer is showing is no, it's not. This answer does a great job of paring it down to what the church is really up to. And it's all about the use and the trademark of the word Mormon. It's your turn, right, Rebecca? 58?
Did you just read RFM? If you did, then it's Bill's.
I thought it was Bill, but maybe it was me. We sound so much alike, remember?
I can't at this point.
I read that white race one.
I thought it was me. My mistake. It is your turn, Rebecca.
There we go. It's a free-for-all. 58. Dehlin was the first host of Mormon Matters podcast, which was eventually brought under the OSF umbrella with Dan Witherspoon. I love Dan Witherspoon as the host. Mormon Matters podcast content has been continuously available from 2007 through today via OSF. This is true. I started listening in like 20 or so. The church has never taken any action against or communicated any trademark or branding concerns about the Mormon Matters podcast with the shading and the blue.
Right. And now they're going to repeat this refrain and just change the chorus each time. Remember, this is Mormon Matters, not Mormon Stories. OSF's Mormon Matters podcast has utilized at least 2 shades of blue in the podcast logos, which use design elements depicting sun rays shown below. Well, these have it too. A different kind of thing. But as far as the sun rays, but it is sun rays, at least on the one on the left. And on the one on the right, it's like part of it is a little bit lighter, is what I see. It's sort of like when we go and make slides and use the gradient. You know what I mean?
Yep.
60. Whosever's turn it is it
It's
Bill?
Bill.
In 2011, Open Stories Foundation created the Mormon Mental Health blog at mormonmentalhealth.com to provide mental health resources and information to Mormon communities and anyone who self-identifies as Mormon for any reason. The Mormon Mental Health podcast was launched in December of 2012, was hosted by therapist Natasha Helfer Parker. Content for the Mormon Mental Health podcast and website was created from December 2012 through April 2022 and has been continuously available through today.
Okay, so this is where they're going to be singing the same song with different chorus, and the different chorus is all the different times and different kinds of podcasts that John Dehlin and OSF have put out under that umbrella. Rebecca, 61.
We want to keep reading them. Okay, 61. The church has never taken any action against or communicated any trademark or branding concerns about the Mormon Mental Health podcast. Again, with a similar logo, similar look.
And the word Mormon.
And the word Mormon, most importantly, yes.
And now it's going to continue with other examples, which I don't think we need to read every word. It's going to talk about a thoughtful faith, which actually was OSF's. Take the A off, and all of a sudden, Jacob Hansen stole that one. In August 2012, maybe he means it to be ironic. In August 2012, OSF launched a podcast called A Thoughtful Faith. And I remember listening to that. It was the Kiwi Down Under. Who was it who hosted that?
Was it Simon?
Colvin.
It was
Colvin,
Gina. That's right. It
I
was
thought
Gina.
she was great.
Yep.
But that was called A Thoughtful Faith, and it's a Mormon Stories affiliated podcast. Okay, so it doesn't have the word Mormon in it, but guess what it has? A blue logo, which does have A Thoughtful Faith on it and Mormon Stories on it, and some kind of lighting going on with that. Maybe not rays. All right, so content for A Thoughtful Faith has been available ever since. Now, here's another thing that OSF launched. And if you could read this, Bill, number 64.
Number 64. In February 2012, the Open Stories Foundation launched the website at whymormonsquestion.org to help build understanding about why some people have doubts and questions about their Mormon faith. The Why Mormons Question website was launched with the following blue logo. And again, I see a little bit of, I don't know if that's a solid color. It looks like it's darker, more at the bottom than it is at the top.
Yeah, I didn't know about this one, but it just goes, it's more grist for the mill. Use of the word blue, use of the word Mormon, and the church twiddling its thumbs and not doing anything to raise an objection until very recently. Number 65, Rebecca?
Let's see, 64, 65. On May 2nd, 2012, OSF posted an episode of Mormon Stories podcast showing a presentation titled Why Mormons Question, given by Dehlin at Utah Valley University as part of a Mormon Studies conference using the same blue logo. Employees of the church and Brigham Young University attended the presentation and subsequently wrote about it online. And again, the church's logo at this time was not blue, I don't believe. I wish somebody would look it up in the chat. I don't believe the church moved to that blue logo. So, of course, they wouldn't comment. They'd just say, so what? Blue and Mormon. Nobody cares.
That's exactly what they're showing.
Yeah.
Is that Mormons knew about it because they were present when it happened. They wrote about it, but nobody cared about it.
Yep.
And they slept on their rights.
Yep.
Let's see. In September 2017, OSF launched the domain MormonFaithCrisis.com. So there's another one, right? The gift of the Mormon faith crisis that they use without any objection from the church. For years, from 2018 to 24, the Mormon Stories website in its About link depicted the OSF's Mormon-themed podcasts, including the use of blue and light rays in its podcast logo. So that was going on for those 6 to 7 years, 2018 to 2024. They show some examples of those. Here's Mormon Stories with the light rays. Mormon Faith Crisis has a sun with light rays. So you can see the different examples that they have with light rays being used in Open Stories podcast affiliated, Open Stories Foundation affiliated podcast. The foregoing Mormon-themed podcasts have been and remain available, right? So they're still up It's not like they only had it up for a year or so and then took them down so nobody would know or be able to see by looking. No, they're still up, and the Mormon Church should know about them. Now, Bill, can you read 69?
Yep. The Mormon Stories podcast was first published on iTunes in 2005. The gold light rays logo was first incorporated into the podcast on iTunes around 2011. Later, Mormon Stories was published on Anchor, which later became Spotify, on December 8th, 2017, using the gold light rays logo shown below.
Now, they are responding to everything, including light rays and colors, and they must, and they're doing a great job of it, I think. But really, it's about Mormon. So there's an example, right? Okay, so let's see.
70.
Number 70, is that you, Rebecca?
I think that's me. And they have to respond because rays is a separate complaint, as is blue.
Yes.
So they have to show we use rays. Here they are very early on. But you're right, it's all a smokescreen. Number 70, in 2022, a YouTube consultant that OSF had recently engaged recommended that the Mormon Stories YouTube banner be updated. Okay, that makes sense.
Now, so it's going to go to blue, right? In December 2022, the YouTube consultant worked with OSF's contracted graphic designer to create a new logo design for YouTube, consistent with defendants' historical online designs implementing blue backgrounds and light ray motifs. OSF adopted a blue background for the new Mormon Stories logo. So this is trying to give the backstory and why it is that their logo from 2022, at the end of 2022, ended up looking kind of like the church's. 72, Bill.
All right. The given defendant's longtime use of light ray designs in the gold light rays logo and elsewhere, Open Stories Foundation web designer wanted to continue that theme and downloaded the following free blue design from FreePick. He leaves the link there that you can click and see that is a free pick available, completely separate from the church, to create their new logo.
So here's what I want to know. So the church is complaining that this is copyright infringement, that John Dehlin is using this absolutely free blue design. What I want to know is how much did the church pay to come up with their design?
They probably downloaded this, to be honest. And it's so frustrating because I've seen on social media faithful members saying, yeah, John himself wanted to trick everybody. So he went over and copied the church's blue and brought it over on purpose to deceive. Again, that's not how it works. It's a graphic designer working with a consultant who comes up with something that's, a shout out to what it used to be, but it's updated. That's how it works. No one is sitting in a closet trying to deceive somebody. It's so frustrating.
Yeah, you can imagine that it wouldn't look very good to be much of a trademark infringement if you said that they're using the same free design that I used.
Or like a drawing of a statue that, belongs somewhere else in another country of a Christus, right? It just wouldn't look good.
I'm totally at sea. Is this you, Bill, 73?
Yes, I think it's Bill.
All right. And ultimately, the following updated logo was adopted across many of the Mormon Stories podcast platforms in and after December 2022.
Okay, so there it is.
There it is.
And Rebecca.
And then it says the new Mormon Stories logo was designed to fit within and maintain consistency with OSF's historical logo designs dating back more than a decade. Below is a depiction of the 2022 Mormon Stories blue logo with the logos for OSF's other podcasts. So the continuity there, you can see that. If you're a graphic designer, you're going to notice, oh yeah, they're slightly different, but they're all reminiscent. You can instantly recognize this as part of OSF. That's how it's done.
Well, this is certainly their backstory on how it was they came up with the light rays. Because these light rays on Mormon Stories as of the 2022 that they just got done talking about are the ones that look similar to what the church has.
Yeah.
And really, in the process of bringing that up and talking about that, they also bring up all the other blue things that Mormon Open Stories Foundation has used throughout the years, as well as the light rays. So OSF did not intentionally design its blue Mormon Stories logo to mimic or resemble the church's branding in any way. Okay. Bill?
But number 76, over 2 decades, defendants have expended significant time and resources promoting the Mormon-themed podcast associated with Open Stories Foundation, and the public has come to know the OSF's Mormon-themed podcast as offering perspectives in content about Mormonism wholly independent from the church.
Okay.
Yep. 77. Across YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and other social media platforms, Defendants Mormon Stories podcast has collectively garnered hundreds of millions of views, plays, tens of millions of hours watched, listened, and hundreds of thousands of subscribers and followers.
So in 78, it's going to talk about all the subscribers and millions of views and all this kind of stuff. And the whole point is to show how much out there in the public this has been. Okay, so the church knows about it. Plus the fact that there's this side of it that the lawsuit's going to talk about is that if you slept on your rights for 20 years, and John Dehlin's been using Mormon Stories, then the law presumes that there's prejudice. In other words, that his having this for 20 years. There's two sides to the analysis. The first is to the side of the person who owns the trademark, right? So they have the benefit of the trademark. They've gone to the effort of trademarking. It has been trademarked, okay? But then they sleep on it for 20 years. That's looking at it from their perspective. Looking at it from John's perspective, he's been using Mormon Stories for 20 years because the church never raised an objection. And because the church never raised an objection, he has put all this effort, time, energy, money into Mormon Stories. And so it's not just a presumed prejudice in this case, it's a demonstrated prejudice. Prejudice is not even an issue, I think, in this case, that because the LDS Church has not objected to John Dehlin's using Mormon Stories or anything else that they're objecting to now, that he is definitely prejudiced because he's put all of this capital into promoting that brand.
Can I
make sense?
Yeah. Can I share, because we talked about it earlier, just so that we have the facts straight, let me take this one down for just a second. Okay. I went back into the Wayback Machine. This is 2005, 2004, 2006, and those 3 years. This is what the church's website looked like. Now they're using blue for sure. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't call the clouds up there light rays. It looks like they're distinguishing one cloud from another by changing the shade of the clouds. Mm-hmm. But when you look at what John Dehlin has done, he's first off, Open Stories Foundation. I don't remember if they did, but I don't think they used the blue originally, correct? Open Stories was one thing. And then Mormon Stories was the blue. But he created multiple podcasts, sort of like we do, right? Mormon Discussion, Mormonism Live, Radio Free Mormon. And each one has its own brand, and you want to distinguish them from each other. So in Radio Free Mormon, for instance, we use teals. Mormonism Live, we use yellows and golds. And Mormon Discussion, we use a lot of purple and black. And you only have so many basic colors. You can get, fuchsia and all kinds of indigo and whatever fun colors you want to create. But for the most part, there are these basic colors that you can pick from. Yeah. To make a big deal out of the blue color, when John has multiple podcasts that are using different colors, mm-hmm. to make a big deal out of the sun rays when John's using them before the church uses them, I just think there's something dishonest about that argumentation, and or ignorance and stupidity. It could be that too, I guess.
No, it's dishonest. It's not ignorance. This is their brief. They wrote it. They have to stand by it. You don't get to write a brief in ignorance. I mean, that would be horrible. You've got to have facts, right? But this gets to what the brief talks about, Bill. What you said is that they don't talk about the timeline. They just make sweeping allegations. They never talk about when it started. So they try and give the impression that there's been something bad going on when actually it hasn't.
I feel like it's these same people who write things like this legal mumbo jumbo for the church that also are in charge of like carefully crafting the gospel topic essays and making sure you tell leaders like, don't say this or don't acknowledge that, but massage this over here and carefully craft this one because it seems so intentional. Again, I agree with you. I was trying to be funny. Like, you guys want to plead ignorance and stupidity, go for it. But yeah, no worries. I'll just say, like,
seriously,
everything in the church is so carefully worded and crafted, and just, man, just be honest, guys. Like, just start being honest. You're a religion. You're a church. Tell the truth. That's what, of all places that should tell the truth, a church should tell the truth, and you don't, time and time again.
this is the main theme I get out of these filings today, is that it's exposing the church has been lying again, over and over. This is what they do. For the church, the Mormon church, lying is not a bug, it's a feature. Okay, you don't have anything you want to add, Rebecca?
No, I'm just glad we got to see. And I'm guessing that in the court proceedings, the church will have to produce what its logos look like, what its colors were, because it's making this argument that it's been this problem, for decades. So I guess they'll have to produce that and show it.
You shouldn't make any allegations in your complaint or your answer that you're not prepared to prove.
Yes.
Unless you're doing it under, because you think it's so and you say so. Okay. Because that also happens. Under information, upon information and belief, we allege this. That's what you say when you don't have proof for it, but you think it's probably what happened, and you expect that proof to surface during the discovery process. Excuse me. Okay, so it's going to talk about all the things that had happened from 2007 to 2025, where John Dehlin has shown up, ABC, Nightline, all these places, and they have an Exhibit A, which is a non-exhaustive list of all the places he's shown up promoting Mormon Stories. Once again, the two sides of this. He's known nationally, even internationally, and he's known as Mormon Stories. All right, so he's promoting Mormon Stories. He is investing in it. For example, on June 19th, 2007, Dehlin appeared on ABC's Good Morning America. And that was almost 20 million subscribers to ABC's YouTube. So it's been a lot of views. Here's a picture of John Dehlin. He was so young back then. Look at that boyish face. But see what's under John Dehlin. MormonStories.org.
And this is at a time when the church is using the word Mormon. Remember the Mormon moment, I am a Mormon? And they had no issue with him also using the word Mormon when they were using the word Mormon. I mean, you'd think that would be when they would say, hey, this is confusing because we're having a Mormon moment. We are Meet the Mormons. I am a Mormon. And you're saying Mormon Story, but they have absolutely no problem there. And they're obviously aware. They have an entire department that scours all media looking for mentions of Mormonism. This is huge. So that just doesn't fly, that they wouldn't be aware.
It's a good point. I think that Gordon B. Hinckley and Thomas S. Monson were both smarter than Dallas Oaks, because they both could have and were doubtless counseled about the possibility of filing a lawsuit against John Dehlin on this basis, and they both declined.
Yeah, and that's when the church was actively using the word Mormon. Instead of, like you keep saying, sleeping on the word now, they're not sleeping on it. They are ferociously distancing themselves and condemning the word. I mean, it's a campaign, right? It has been for almost a decade.
That's what makes the church's position so bad in this case.
Yep.
So they talk about ABC releasing an article. Once again, all these views, Mormon Stories podcast being run by ABC News. And there's a picture of a screen where the story's on it. 2013, the New York Times publishes an article. Remember all those times that John Dehlin was being published in the New York Times about many different things. And it was always in association with Mormon Stories. Okay. 2015 alone, the New York Times published 3 articles about John Dehlin and Mormon Stories. So they are documenting the heck out of this. You can see that the lawyers who wrote the answer were much better lawyers than the lawyers who wrote the complaint. And that's just looking at the facts and how they're presented and how it's easy to understand what's going on. The answer filed by John Dehlin's lawyers looks like it's trying to explain everything to make it clear, whereas the complaint looks like it's trying to hide stuff and make it fuzzy and hazy.
How would you answer that question, RFM, if you were somehow a lawyer defending the church and someone said to you, why, when the church was embracing the word Mormonism and it was their campaign, why did you not go after this person at that moment when he was also using the word Mormon? I mean, what possible defense could someone give for that question?
Well, the fact that they don't bring up that answer in their complaint suggests the difficulty in coming up with a good one.
Yeah, I hope someone asks that question of them.
Oh, the judge will.
I hope so.
Oh, I'm sure the judge will. It'll probably happen at some point during the motion to dismiss that the church has filed. Bill?
There is again, I'm going to say Mormon Mental Health is the organization, but there is an entity with Mormon in the name that fought the church on this. And the legal system, this had nothing to do with trademark registration, which was the situation that we were under with the church. Our interaction with them had to do with that. But in John's instance, it's their use of the word Mormon and other things having to do with branding, which don't make a lot of sense now that we talk about sort of the light rays and the color. But this other entity, and I think it was Mormon Mental Health, but the legal system, the church either withdrew and backed away, or the legal system determined that Mormon was a general term and that nobody owned it in this way and that anybody was free to use it. And Mormon Mental Health, or whatever organization it was, I think it was them, got to continue to use the word Mormon in their name. And so there already is some moments in the past that this is already, these sort of battles have already been fought over.
Okay, thank you for adding that. If you'll allow me to pop on over this rather quickly, that concludes our reading of the facts under subsection A. Now it's going to go to different subsections, and these facts are important, but they're going to be largely cumulative. They're going to be gilding the lily. The church's knowledge of and acquiescence to Dehlin's Mormon Stories podcast, which is going to be additional facts that show the church was aware of his podcast and had been for a long time. And it goes back to 2005 and John Dehlin and talking about his association with church leaders and doing that survey. And it breaks that down in detail here in this subsection. See, with evidence. In October 2009, Dehlin again noticed activity from the church's headquarters browsing his MormonStories.org website. And again, emailed his brother about it. Hey, bro, any idea what this is? Just curious, the list's name caught my eye. So anyway, so it continues and talks about their meetings with Elder Holland, Elder Marlon K. Jensen, all of these things that led up to John Dehlin doing that survey and having those meetings with leadership of the church. Though my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, that he wasn't actually present when his survey was presented to the GAs. That had to be done by somebody else. But this was his work, and he had met with them several times other than that ultimate meeting. Does that sound familiar to you, Bill or Rebecca?
Yeah, I think that's how it was. They put it together, but then someone else, an insider, presented it.
Okay. So here we are now on 110. On January 20, could you read this, Rebecca?
Sorry, what was that? 110? You want me to read that?
Yeah, I tried to find a couple of paragraphs that would sort of synopsize this whole situation.
I put my phone down when you were reading here. Okay, so 110, here we are. Okay. On January 27th, 2012, Dehlin had a personal meeting with Jensen to discuss the Why Mormons Question and Leave research. Dehlin and Jensen spoke at length about Mormon Stories podcast and Dehlin's motivations for starting it. At no point did Jensen express concern about the trademark or copyright infringement or any other type of brand confusion.
Because none of them ever did.
Right.
Ever. Hey, Bill, can you read 111?
Yeah, 111. On January 30th of 2012, Dehlin and Stratford received the following email from Jensen via Jensen's official church email account, letting them know that Apostle Quentin Cook and Apostle L. Tom Perry would be recommending that the church's Public Affairs Committee allow Stratford to share Dehlin's research with church leadership in Salt Lake City.
Okay. And there that is.
And there it is.
Dear Travis and John from Marlon K. Jensen, church historian at the time. In March 2012, Dehlin published the survey results in a report titled Why Mormons Disbelieve, which he presented at the Utah Valley University Mormon Studies Conference attended by various BYU professors using the following blue logo. This is why they keep harping on it, right? Why Mormons question. Now we're going to continue to 115. And I got us out of order, but Bill, if you could read 115, then we'll go to Rebecca next.
The data from Dehlin's foregoing surveys was ultimately used to create a June 2013 report titled LDS Personal Faith Crisis for the church's most senior leadership, specifically President Dieter F. Uchtdorf, who at the time was the second counselor in the church's first presidency. A copy of that report can also be found online. He gives the link, and he gives a secondary link where you can find it as well. On August 23rd, 2013, brand strategist Stratford met with President Uchtdorf in Uchtdorf's personal office in Salt Lake City to discuss the faith crisis report.
Thank you. So that continues on with additional paragraphs and additional details. Let's skip to 119. Rebecca, can you read that?
119. Yes. Here's a question, though. Could President Uchtdorf be made to testify, and they could ask him, you knew this person was presenting data, you knew he ran something called Mormon Stories. Did you at any time have a problem with him using the word Mormon? Could they ask
No,
him?
you would never ask him that.
You could never ask him any of those questions.
You would never ask him that. That would be
Oh.
a bad question to ask, because then he can make up any question, any answer he wants.
Oh,
You don't ask
oh.
about, did you have a problem with it in that situation?
Oh,
Did you
I would never
ever-
assume that he would make something up or lie. No, that would never happen. I was so naive.
No, I would allow them to. I would allow John to make the claim that he or anybody else never expressed any concern to John Dehlin.
Right.
That's what
That's
you're
what I was
talking
getting
about.
at, because
Not
many of
whether
these
you had a
people,
problem, but whether you
right,
expressed
these
any
people are
concern to John
living.
Dehlin.
These people are alive. I just wonder if they could be asked. But you're saying don't ask them because they'll say, yeah, come to think of it, I do have a big problem. All right. Trying to
Well, I
think
think
like
it's
a
up to the church to call them. If they're actually going to testify,
Oh, interesting.
well, if they're going to testify different than what John Dehlin says,
Okay.
that they're going to testify to, which is nothing. They didn't say anything, and they're going to say, yeah, I told John Dehlin. This is bogus, this Mormon Stories name that you have.
Interesting. Okay. 119.
And you better
No,
knock it off. And you better knock it off, or we're going to sue your ass. If that's
that
what they're
makes
going to say, then they're going to have to say that.
they would
Because
have to
they'll have
say
to
it.
testify, and the church will have to call them.
And we all know that's not true. So, but
Well,
it wouldn't be the first time.
That wasn't the question.
119. No survey respondents claim to mistakenly believe that Mormon Stories podcast was affiliated with or sponsored by the church. Quite the contrary. It was obvious to every respondent who mentioned Mormon Stories in the report that the podcast contained content that was critical of the church's history and hierarchy. See the Faith Crisis Report, page 92, stating that the podcast introduced much of the history of the church that I never knew existed, much of it which was deeply troubling and not in line with the church that I had known throughout my life. This is
And
John
that's
Dehlin
plenty.
speaking.
That's plenty.
Yeah.
They're
Okay.
going to give similar quotes. It's going
Yeah,
to go
so
on
that
for some
answers my
time.
question. Nobody said, we can't look at this survey. It's from something called Mormon Stories, and that's against our trademark. No one said that.
Right. No one confused Mormon Stories with
No.
the church, and none of the survey respondents.
Okay.
And then C, the church's excommunication of Dehlin. Now, of course, they excommunicated him. They started in 2014, but the axe didn't fall till 2015, as I recall. It was a slow-moving axe, which may have been complicated by Kate Kelly's excommunication. And Dehlin's delayed, so it didn't fall immediately at the same time. But they go through that. And once again, this whole idea that the church knows who he is, and they can't go and talk about how at this date they weren't aware of him. 128. On February 10th, 2015, the church issued a press release about Dehlin's excommunication. So if you issue a press release about something, you can't say later that you didn't know about it. Bill, can you read 130?
On information and belief, on December 8th, 2015, the church's Quorum of the 12 Apostles held a meeting, part of which addressed reasons that people leave the church. On information and belief, a presentation from that meeting included the following slide identifying Dehlin as a major cause for the church losing members. Effectively, I got to see that top part though. If you go back up for a second. You're on mute.
Sorry, I'm actually doing this on purpose, not the muting part, but the scrolling down, because I want you to refresh your recollection, everybody out there, on what this graph is.
Yeah, these are the bubbles. So this came out, and it was the church. This was a behind the scenes document that was shared inside the church that got leaked, that was expressing who the problems are out in the world that are causing trouble for the church. And the bigger the bubble, that was supposed to be a bigger problem that the church was having with that entity. And John Dehlin has a bubble. And as it points out there above, that this essentially expressly indicates an admission on the church's part about John Dehlin, about Mormon Stories podcast, because how can you have a bubble if the church doesn't know about you?
This is ridiculous. There's not even a bubble for historicity or truth claims or DNA. I mean, did they really not understand that people were learning to look things up online? This is incredible.
Yeah, and Bill, they're actually saying more than that. They're actually saying it's effectively an admission that his Mormon Stories podcast did not create confusion about the podcast being affiliated with or sponsored by the church. You know, I've read this paragraph a number of times. I'm not sure that it is effectively an admission. In other words, I could conceive of somebody like John Dehlin, who's portraying himself as being the church and causing that confusion, who would still get their own bubble on an internal slide created by the church to talk about problems to the church. I don't see those as necessarily being contradictory or impossible together. But maybe I'm not understanding it correctly, and maybe people in the live chat will be able to point out why it is that this is effectively an admission. It's just not something I'm seeing yet. And if I'm not seeing it, then it either probably should have been explained maybe a little better, or paragraph 130 omitted, or at least that part effectively, that last line, that last clause. Okay. 131, Rebecca.
Yeah, sorry, I'm still just mesmerized by this chart. I've seen it before, but whoever made this chart needs to now read Jeff Strong's book, who he's desperately trying to tell people this is why people leave. All right, 131. Shortly after becoming president of the church in October 2025, and shortly after the church began the surprising intellectual property enforcement campaign against defendants and other Mormon-themed podcasts in November of 2025, President Oaks gave a talk on February 10th, 2026, warning church members about the dangers of podcasts, stating, "An abundance of speculation and false information in podcasts and on social media surrounds us. Some may protest or question the truth of church doctrine without knowing or even understanding the fullness of that doctrine." Oh, we remember podcasting on that, don't we?
Well, that's under the heading of "Thank you, President Oaks, for revealing your true intent behind filing this lawsuit."
That's it. We just don't understand.
And it just happened to be in November when the church contacted John Dehlin to talk about negotiations. Yeah. They didn't underscore that here, but I'm sure they will if it comes up. There's a lot of facts here. This is a very fact-abundant case. Then they go to the generic meaning of Mormon, and they talk about how Mormon doesn't just mean the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Then in 133, it says, "The public understands the term Mormon to refer to the beliefs, practices, history, teaching, and members associated with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The broader Latter-day Saint movement, it's not exclusive to the Brighamite Church, and other traditions based on Joseph Smith Jr., and his account is published in the Book of Mormon. Such Mormon religions are comprised of over 400 denominations." So it's not exclusive at all to the LDS Church that is trying to enforce its trademark. So, in other words, it's not just John Dehlin who's been doing this. Look at all these other churches have been doing it, and this also constitutes Mormonism. It is a generic phrase. You can't trademark a generic phrase, and phrases can go from being specific to generic over the course of time, and Mormons, I think, is one of them. 135. Bill, can you read 135?
The term Mormon is and has been widely used by multiple providers of religious education or entertainment services, including those critical of the church, to describe the content and focus of their offerings, including, for example, the following.
And here's a long list, but there's only a few that I've highlighted. There's 3. Can you read those, Rebecca?
Let's see. We have Mormon Discussions Podcast, Radio Free Mormon Podcast, and Mormonism Live Podcast. You guys made it into the lawsuit. Look at
Let
you.
me see. Mormonish.
No, it's
Hey,
too
you're
itchy.
down there. There's Mormonish. I
Oh,
didn't underline it.
what? Oh, we're trying to be under the radar. What?
Mormon-ish podcast, and all these others, including the Book of Mormon Play and the Secret Lives of Mormon
Yeah.
Wives. So if any of you are wondering if those 2 were going to make an appearance, they did. Right there. Okay. So then it goes on. I marked the paragraphs that I wanted to come back to. 139. Is this Rebecca now?
I think it's me, 139. The church itself has publicly declared that Mormon has long been used as a nickname for members of the church and is correctly used in proper names or when used as an adjective. Is that
Like
what they're
Mormon
saying?
Stories.
Yeah, that's interesting. In fact, do you remember when they came out so adamantly against Mormon, and a lot of other people in other Mormon denominations publicly said, that's fine if the Brighamite branch doesn't want it anymore. We are Mormon. We will take it. The post-Mormons said the same thing. We're more than happy to take the word. The Brighamites, you don't have to have it. So, yeah, there was that distinction right away when they distanced themselves from Mormon.
Well, I'm the guy who for a few months did the Mormon Sunday School, and lots of
Yes.
comments there from members saying,
Yes,
oh my gosh, well, I knew that this wasn't from the church because it used the term Mormon.
that's it. Yep. Get thee hence, Satan.
Who knew the power of discernment was so easy? 142, this is the USPTO, right? United States Patent and Trademark Office. And Trademark Trial and Appeal Board concluded Mormon was generic in connection with serial number this when explaining that Mormon is a word similar to Catholic as a generic term denoting a religion. I wonder if that's a reference to that case you were talking about, Bill.
Yeah, there you go.
143. Can you read this one, Bill?
Yeah. So since the 1800s, people have used and understood the term Mormon as a generic term that identifies a broad category of religious traditions, cultures, and beliefs, and the adherents thereto, including the church and its members, regardless of formal membership, belief, or association with the church organization, and not as a reference to a unique and known source for any specific services or goods. This is reflected in a recent analysis published in Dialogue, an academic journal pertaining to Mormon subject matter. In the article, the author analyzed dozens of news articles employing the term Mormon, finding out that Mormon is applied broadly by the public to refer to various faith traditions that ascribe to the teachings of Joseph Smith Jr. and or the Book of Mormon. And it says, see various stuff. I'll just note, this is all you have to do is go to Sunstone and hear Lindsay Hansen Park talk about Sunstone and all of the branding where it says there's more than one way to Mormon. It refers to the FLDS people. It refers to the Colorado City fundamentalist. It refers to the Community of Christ or the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints at times. It is a general term that is used to describe people in and out of the church who still associate with the Joseph Smith Restoration.
Yes, and who was it who was very much instrumental in creating this journal called Dialogue?
Dehlin Oaks.
This was another thing that brought smiles to faces, as it does to mine right now. So then they go and quote from that. And then now we get to this next section. The churches express abandonment of Mormon. Oh, yeah. Now we're going to tell you, Judge, what the church didn't tell you. Can you read 144, Rebecca?
Yes, let me get here. Okay, the churches express abandonment of Mormon. That's right. In 2002, sorry, Plaintiff Intellectual Reserve filed U.S. trademark application set number blah, 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 to register Mormon for religious services, namely operating places of assembly for worship and gatherings, ministerial services, namely providing religious worship services and conducting church-sponsored programs. The examiner refused registration, finding that Mormon was generic because it would be understood as a religion or church. Office action, March 18th, 2003. Notwithstanding multiple attempts by the Plaintiff Intellectual Reserve, Inc. to overcome this, how do you say it again?
Genericness.
What is it?
Genericness.
Oh, it is just generic. I was going to put the emphasis on
It's
the wrong
making
syllable.
it's making a noun out of
Genericness. There you
yeah.
go. Refusal. The examiner issued no fewer than 4 separate office actions refusing registration based on genericness grounds. Even though the plaintiff appealed the refusal to the board, the plaintiff failed to file its brief, resulting in dismissal of the appeal on July 23rd, 2007, and causing the USPTO to issue a formal notice of abandonment on August 22nd, 2007. So it was for those specific purposes. They were not allowed religious worship to copyright the word Mormon because they only own the Mormon copyright for, I think it's genealogy and educational purposes. They own it for a very specific niche. I did a podcast on this, but it
Yes.
sounds like here they were trying to trademark it for a religious worship kind of a function. And they were not allowed to do that because it was too generic.
This is very important, I think. What do you think about this, Bill?
I don't have much to say. You can just move on from here.
Okay, Rebecca.
I think that's a smoking gun. I think that's huge. They are not allowing them to trademark it for use by a church. They've allowed them to trademark it. And I have to remember it was something to do with institute and educational purposes and genealogy that they could trademark the word around that. But they're not letting them use it here as some kind of a blanket identifier. And they tried and failed several times. I think this is one of the more smoking gun paragraphs.
I think so too.
Yeah, this is an admission that the word doesn't just get a blanket trademark for everything.
Yes.
It clearly, again, the reason I'm stammering is because I'm still trying to figure out who that other entity was. This isn't that though. This is something.
Oh, you're trying to look it up.
Yeah. So I was trying to find the other one because that's the same idea. The legal system said you guys can't just use this word everywhere and say you're the only ones that own it. You trademarked it for specific instances, and Rebecca, you pointed out there's 2 instances that they did that for. You don't own the word in all the other places. It still has a right to be used by people as a general term.
Yeah, and I don't think this was the upshot of a lawsuit like your case was that you talked about, Bill. This is just the church going to the U.S. Trademark Office and applying for Mormon in this context, and the examiner saying no.
No way.
Yep.
There's not an other party in there. It's just the church and the examiner. That's
So
how I read this.
How much weight would that be given? That another governmental entity already said, no, that's not how you can use that. That's not how you can appropriate that.
Well, because the church failed to appeal it, it becomes the law of the case. So I think that's very important, this particular paragraph.
Smoking gun.
And then it goes on with some more, and then we get to 149, Bill. Are you still looking that up, Bill? Would you like me to read this?
No, I've got it. 149. So on August 16, 2018, the church definitively declared Mormon is out. President Russell M. Nelson, then president of the church, announced that the church would no longer use Mormon as a brand identifier for the church and would limit its use moving forward to descriptive of nominative references to the Book of Mormon or the Mormon Battalion or, those kinds of things, or other proper nouns and use as an adjective.
Yes. And we all remember this very well. And the judge probably knows about it. I expect he lives in Utah since that's where he works. So I'm sure everybody who lives in Utah is paying any attention knew all about this. And if he didn't, he sure does now. So 150, around the same time, the church released a new style guide for the media to use when reporting about the church. And we all know what it said. Don't use Mormon church. That offends us. And it goes on to say what it is in detail. 153, Rebecca.
Yes. There it is. Yeah. And this is about the time when all of our friends and neighbors started turning on us when we just used Mormon in conversation. And they would literally shut down conversations and get right in your face and say, I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And the church institutionally would sort of censure newspapers or other things that use the word Mormon. They were really trying to stick to this right out of the gate. So 153, in October 2018, President Nelson spoke in a globally broadcast talk explaining the church's decision to abandon the use of Mormon, calling the definitive action a correction that was commanded by God. President Nelson explained, I swear I have this memorized. The name of the church is not negotiable. Oh my gosh. For much of the world, the Lord's church is presented disguised as the Mormon church. When we omit his name from the church, we are inadvertently removing him as the central focus of our lives. He went so far as declaring that every use of Mormon church is a major victory for Satan.
Apparently, in the talk under paragraph 154, President Nelson acknowledged that some had criticized the decision,
Mhm.
using worldly arguments about branding in view of the digital world in which we live and with search engine optimization that helps all of us find information online. To the critics, he explained, if this were a discussion about branding a man-made organization, those arguments might prevail. But in this crucial matter, we look to him, that's a capital H, whose church this is, and acknowledge that the Lord's ways are not and never will be man's ways. And apparently the Lord's ways are not the ways of the United States Trademark and Patent Office.
Well, do you know who those critics were? It was their freaking marketing department who, and I've had people tell me, we're just dying over this. You do not abandon a worldwide recognized and beloved brand. People try to achieve that, for decades. They abandon it. The money that it costs, we're hearing that, billion has been thrown around to change everything, like it was detailed in the last hour. And I've even heard anecdotally that marketing department is still sitting on a lot of the word Mormon, ready to roll it back out when they finally come to their senses. So these aren't critics. These are smart people who know how an organization works online. And this was a disaster. But
I think if they roll it out again, they're going to have to roll it out without a trademark.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Can you read 155, Bill?
Consistent with President Nelson's directive, the church followed through with the monumental undertaking of abandoning Mormon in all of its branding and trademark usage.
And 156, Rebecca?
I'm sorry, this part just gets me so mad. It's so ridiculous. To institutionalize the correction of removing Mormon from all of the church's branding, President Nelson assigned President M. Russell Ballard, of course, acting president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, to lead the effort.
Yes, it's like a trip down memory lane. All of it's so bad for the church.
So bad.
And all of it's stuff that the church should have said at the outset. It actually should not have filed this lawsuit. I've got a feeling there must have been somebody. I would hope there would be somebody pleading with President Oaks, don't do this. This is what's going to happen. And that he did it anyway. But I suspect they're all yes men, so maybe they didn't even do that much. 157, signaling the permanent nature and seriousness of the abandonment of Mormon, the effort included changing the name of the church's biggest international brands, such as the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. That's the one that's going to prove it. You don't need any more. The Mormon Tabernacle Choir and Mormon.org, which was the church's website name, or it's LDS.org, but they had a Mormon.org as well, and they changed that. Bill and Rebecca, can you alternate the next two, 158 and 159?
The church reported that over 1,000 products that had the name Mormon or LDS attached were renamed.
My gosh.
Quick, what is the choir called now?
The Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square.
Is it? Yeah, nobody knows. And this whole bowl thing that they're having, nobody knows. They keep calling it the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. Just pointing out how ridiculous. Okay, 159. The church also updated 300 web-based apps and acquired 800 domain names in the United States and around the world for use of the full church name to prevent use of the word Mormon to describe the church.
I am loving each and every one of these particular paragraphs because each one is a spade full of dirt that is burying the church.
Yep.
160, Bill? Or is this me now? I guess it's me. As part of the church's abandonment of Mormon and its branding in October 2018, the church publicly announced that the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, going back more than 150 years, had abandoned the use of Mormon in its name and is today known as the Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square. There it is right there.
Nobody knows. In the chat, they're all giving different names. Nobody freaking knows. Their identity is gone.
Well, if you remember T-Cats, you can usually piece it together.
Exactly. Like Taco J. Colds. Yep.
And it's going to go on through all these other things, okay? We don't have the time to read them, Once again, burying the church, showing that they have absolutely abandoned. They have thrust the word Mormon, their trademark, their formerly trademarked term. They thrust it away from them with both hands.
Could John's team ask them to reveal how much money the church spent to distance themselves? I mean, I'm hearing like 8 billion. Is that relevant? This is how much we wanted to lose that name. We spent this much money. Could that be part of it?
That's the only way I can think of that it could be relevant.
Mhm.
And it might work. I mean,
Yeah.
it's all
Discovery.
depends on whether it's relevance, and a judge might think,
Right.
well, that is relevant. How much money did
Yeah.
you put your money where your mouth is?
You do. How bad did you want this done? Oh, $1 billion worth. Yeah. Instead of giving to humanitarian efforts, we put it all toward completely divorcing ourselves from the word Mormon to the tune of this much money.
It wasn't cheap.
No.
No. 163 in the frequently asked questions, the FAQ of the church, it says, why don't we call ourselves Mormons? Well, we all know why, because that's not our name, and we know what the real name of the church is. So all these ways the church has continued, and I'm continuing to scroll. 168, can you read 168, Bill?
Yep. Following the church's public denunciation of the term Mormon to describe the church, its members, and its goods and services, plaintiffs ceased use of the word Mormon as a trademark in 2018, have not resumed use of the word as a trademark in commerce in connection with services identified in its trademark registrations, and have no bona fide intent to resume use of the term Mormon in commerce in connection with the services identified in its asserted trademark registrations.
It's a good paragraph, huh?
Hmm.
Okay, Rebecca, can you go to 170? By the way, once again, for anybody joining late, I have gone through this a couple of times. I've been trying to highlight the elements that will lead us through and help us understand what it is without reading all 125 pages, which, believe me, takes a lot of time. And we still got another motion to get to.
Oh my
But
goodness.
we're rapidly approaching the end of this. Even though we're on page 64, the last many pages are taken up with exhibits and other things. So could you read 170, Rebecca?
Yeah, 170. Indeed, given the nature of the church's express abandonment, presenting it as a mandate from God and labeling the use of Mormon as a major victory for Satan, all in quotes, the public has come to view any use of Mormon in the branding of goods or services to be a definitive signal that such goods or services are not, bolded, not provided by, affiliated with, or sponsored by the church.
And once again, it's that confusion that lies
Yep.
at the heart of the trademark claim.
Yep.
171, given the church's express public and definitive statements of abandonment of Mormon in its branding, the church has relinquished all trademark rights in or connected to Mormon-styled names. By its own admissions and express directives, any residual token use of Mormon by the church is purely descriptive in nature or de minimis and cannot overcome or reverse the church's explicit abandonment of the name and the public's recognition of the same. So don't be showing us any ancillary little use of Mormon over here on Jasmine's website or something like that that cannot overcome the fact that we have demonstrated that the church has thrust it away and abandoned it affirmatively. Then you get to F. Now, this is what I had mentioned before, the church's fraudulent filings at the United States Patent and Trademark Office. What? Yeah, this is where they claim that the church has been lying to the federal government yet again. It seems to be what the church does on a regular basis. It's just another Monday for the church lying to the federal government.
It is interesting, right? Like on public facing, we are done with Mormon. We're not using it. We've abandoned it. And then behind the scenes, like, let's keep maintaining that trademark and pretending like we're using it just like we used to.
Yes. Could you read 172? We're not going to read all of these, and I've already sort of synopsized it, but this will give you the flavor. Bill?
Yep, 172. Despite the church's explicit public and intentional abandonment of Mormon as a mark, including the wholesale renaming of all prior Mormon-styled branding, the church engaged in an improper and fraudulent scheme inconsistent with its actual real-world branding activities to try to maintain federal trademark registrations for its abandoned Mormon marks, presumably for the purpose of improper enforcement efforts, as is occurring in the present case.
Ba-boom. Great paragraph.
Oh, sorry, am I up?
No,
I
actually,
was highlighting.
I was pausing to see if either of you had any comments about it, but go ahead and
No,
read yours, and then we'll.
that is a smoking gun right there too. These are so good, and I feel like what you said before might be true. Could it be that sort of gerontocracy power grab behind the scenes? You have Nelson going, "We're getting rid of the word Mormon," and you have Oakes a little more cognizant, going, "Oh my gosh, no, we've got to do something," and takes the legal avenue of trying to shore up and protect Mormon behind the scenes, while forward facing, saying, "Yeah, Mormon, we don't want that anymore. You're right." So I think it might be one of those scenarios where Oakes knew better, but there was nothing he could do.
I
Possibly.
think it pained him greatly. At least I hope so.
Yeah, it did. Okay, what number am I on now? 174.
173.
Okay, here we go. 174. The church explicitly.
173.
Oh,
Rebecca.
173. Okay, sorry. Oh, there it is. On information and belief, the church deliberately withheld the news of its express and intentional abandonment of Mormon as a mark from the United States Patent and Trademark Office and submitted inconsistent and false declarations of continued trademark use to the USPTO to improperly maintain federal registration for the Mormon-styled trademarks that the church had deliberately abandoned.
Lies within lies, circles within circles. And they're going to detail and document a number of these, but we're just going to go over the filings regarding the Mormon Tabernacle Choir because you have to periodically renew your trademarks. And the church did. And this is what it says. Bill, or is it me? Okay, 174. I think this is me. The church explicitly and publicly abandoned the use of Mormon in the name and branding of the Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square in 2018. Since then, the church has exclusively marketed the choir's music and performances under the name Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square, has not used Mormon in connection with advertising or promotion of the choir. So, Bill 175.
Yep. For example, the press releases from the church for the Tabernacle Choir's annual Christmas concerts from 2019 to 2025 exclusively refer to the choir as the Tabernacle Choir and do not use the word Mormon in any way. By the way, I just want to say, when you're a dirty dog and you try to get at people in ways that are not ethical, honest, you sort of set yourself up sometimes to stretch yourself a little too far and expose other places where you've been deceptive, dishonest, and been a dirty dog. And this is one of those. And the church needs to realize that there are paths forward where they're making a big deal out of things that they shouldn't, ends up exposing their deceptions and illegal activity. If this is this turns out to be true, and it is true to some extent, but whether it's legally true, they might want to think twice before they stretch themselves in ways that are irresponsible.
Yeah. I said on the record beforehand, I said the church should not file this lawsuit. It's the worst decision the church could make. And that's why I'm going to predict that they're going to file this lawsuit. And so this is what they're doing. They're going to give a for instance of additional deceptions the church made in its complaint in regard to this issue. By the way, for those of you out there who are members of the church and continue to believe what the church leaders tell you about the church, I want you to understand something. The church is exactly as honest and transparent and forthcoming with the history of the church as they are with the facts in this complaint against John Dehlin. So there's a bunch of examples of all those concerts. Then Rebecca, 176.
176, 6 years after explicitly abandoning the use of Mormon in the name of the choir, on March 1st, 2024, the church, via its appointed representatives, submitted to the USPTO Trademark Office sworn declarations of continued use in connection with registration number blah, 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 and blah, 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 pertaining to the abandoned Mormon Tabernacle Choir marks. The declarations falsely stated that the marks were in current use in commerce in connection with live musical performances. Every paragraph is a smoking gun. That is incredible.
Somebody got their hands caught in the cookie jar on that one, didn't they?
That is incredible. And who would know? You're a trademark office. How would you know that some prophet said, don't ever use this? And Bill, you're so exactly right. Like I said, when the church points at John Dehlin, all those other fingers are pointing back at them. And there's an awful lot of things to point about. And this is one of the bigger ones right here, because I'm assuming this is all recorded. We have case numbers right here. This is all going to be recorded.
Well, there's documents to support all of this. Yes.
Right. That's what I mean. They're going to be able to show this. Wow.
Yes. 177. Now, here's where they get a little tricksy. Okay, the church in their complaint basically tried to pull one over on the court. Many of them. This is showing this one, okay? The declarants. Okay, hang on a second here. I may have misstated that. Actually, I think this has to do with back at the United States trademark. So the declarants submitted with the declarations, that is to the UTSPO, an uncorroborated specimen of use purporting to be a photocopy of the program handed out at a single and special alumni Christmas concert in 2023 depicted below. So in 2024, when the church goes and it renews its trademark in the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, it not only falsely claims that the church is continuing to use Mormon Tabernacle Choir, which is like, a requirement to renew your trademark, right? But it also submitted this specimen of use, because you have to show that it's being used when you renew it. So they came up with this. The November 30th, 2023 live Christmas concert. At the bottom, you see it says Mormon Tabernacle Choir. And that old copyrighted image, performed by members of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir Alumni Association. See that at the bottom? Okay, so that's what they used to get their trademark renewed in 2024 in the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. Then it says, Bill, can you read 178?
On information and belief, the submitted program specimen was either not actually used for the concert or at best constitutes a token de minimis use that was done for the sole purpose of creating the sham appearance of use to fraudulently maintain the Mormon Tabernacle Choir trademark registrations for enforcement purposes and does not constitute bona fide trademark use of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir marks.
So they're saying that either this is a sham or it's a one-off that is de minimis and doesn't have anything to do with the fact that everything they've shown, which is that the name was changed to remove Mormon from it. Can you read 179, Rebecca?
Yes, and I have to say, think about how many people send us things. Had this been in circulation, we all would have received this, because it would have been something that we would have brought up on podcasts and things. Look, they're using the word Mormon. So I guarantee this never saw the light of day in regular circulation, because this would have raised alarm bells for people. They would have taken note by 2023 with the use of the word Mormon. That is so sneaky. I am overwhelmed by this.
Well, it's
All
also
right,
not the Mormon Tabernacle Choir.
Yeah.
It's the group of people who once sang for.
Right. It doesn't matter. To use the word Mormon on something officially put out to
Yes.
from the church would have raised alarm. People would have sent it to us, as they do.
You're probably
Okay,
right.
179. Here we go. On information and belief, the declarants also submitted specimens that were altered to misrepresent the nature of the church's continued use of Mormon Tabernacle Choir. For example, as shown below, the declarant submitted a specimen showing a product page from the Deseret Book website selling a 2005 CD from the choir called Love is Spoken Here, found at the URL Deseret Book. A comparison of the 2024 specimen submitted to the USPTO, which is up at the top, versus the same URL product page from the same album as it existed on the Deseret website today, down on the bottom, shows an alteration in the name of the choir in the 2024 UPSTO specimen versus the rebranded name of the choir adopted several years earlier and actually from the website. This is downright completely deceitful. It's not an accident. It's not a mistake. This is on purpose.
So basically in 2005, back when the Mormon Tabernacle Choir was the Mormon Tabernacle Choir,
I'm stunned.
they took a copy of a CD that they had at the time, which said Mormon Tabernacle Choir on it, right? And of course, they went ahead and they submitted it as a specimen in 2024, by the way, to the USPTO as evidence that they continue to use Mormon Tabernacle Choir as the name of their choir. The problem, of course, is that the 2024 specimen submitted to USPTO was a replica, was it of the 2005, was it? Yeah, the 2005 CD. That's why it called it the Mormon Tabernacle Choir right there. But actually, the product page for Love is Spoken Here from this year says the Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square. Now, I'm looking over here on the right. You see, they just reproduced the same image for the cover, which still has Mormon Tabernacle Choir. In the upper left-hand corner between the two, you can see that that's the same in the same picture. Everything is the same about it, except for over here on the right, where it's listed at Deseret Book as the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, which was what the church submitted to the USPTO, versus what it actually looks like, the Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square in 2026.
So did they have to actually upload it to Deseret Book so that they could share that URL or take the picture?
I don't know.
I mean,
It could be a screen grab.
it could be, but I mean, they had to manipulate that. They had to create or use the CD.
Oh, I'm
They
sorry,
had
the
to,
church.
yes, no, the church. That's what I'm saying. You see what
I
I
think
mean?
what the church did was they didn't have this part on the right. They just had the part on the left, and they dated it back to 2005, which
Okay.
is when it was released, right?
Okay. I just wondered if they asked Deseret Book, hey, can you just put this up on your catalog real quick? We just need to get a screenshot and then take
Mhm.
it down.
So
Yes.
dishonest, though, is it?
It's so
It's
incredible. I
so-
am thought nothing more could surprise me, but this actually shocks me.
How's it, RFM, as a lawyer who deals in the legal system, how is the judge likely to feel about the church's deceptions one after another after another?
I think that what the judge is going to do, there's two different kinds of judges in this way. Some of them will get upset about being lied to and consider it a besmirchment of the court that they represent. But once you've been doing it for a long time, there's so many lawyers that do this kind of crap, you kind of get inured to it. And you realize by the time you're done reading this, I expect that Judge Shelby has realized one thing, and that is that he cannot trust the church lawyers to tell him the truth about anything. You know, there's sometimes in court where you'll ask somebody a question and they'll say, oh, I can't remember the document, but this is what happened. Your credibility as an attorney in front of a judge is the most valuable thing an attorney has. And when you have lost it, like I think these guys have lost it from Curtin McConkie, it's gone forever. And this judge is not going to forget this. It doesn't mean you're going to lose the case, right? But it means he knows who he can trust.
I mean, isn't this kind of indefensible? How would you even defend a client who had done this? It's so obviously to deceive.
Yes. Well, we are in the weeds at this point, and sometimes the weeds are a lot of fun and they're cool and refreshing, and you find a lot of fun stuff in the weeds. But I will just go back to something I said at the beginning of the show 6 hours ago, which is that this case rises and falls on the two main facts, which is the 20 years that the church did nothing to object to John Dehlin using Mormon Stories, and the fact that since 2008, they have affirmatively disavowed the use of the word Mormon. But this is a lot of stuff that goes and shows exactly what kind of lawyers these are, and also actually what kind of lawyers John has. And I'm glad to say there's a big difference, and it's in John's favor. Okay, so here's 180. It's strange credulity. Now, there's an oft-heard phrase. Whose turn is it to read this big one, this big paragraph?
I'd love to read it.
Bill's, yeah.
It's strange credulity that the Deseret Book product page for this album would have stated Mormon Tabernacle Choir in 2024 and was only changed to the Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square thereafter, given the extensive and publicized rebranding efforts that began years earlier in 2018 as explained previously. Whether the product page was revised after submitting the specimen in 24 or whether it was altered, and I will just say the font looks weird.
It does.
My hunch is it was altered solely for that. Go back up. Yeah.
You think that font looks weirder than below?
I do.
Yeah.
It's lighter.
There's a difference. Yep.
Yep. So
that's why I asked that question. If they had, manipulated in that way. Yep.
Maybe. No wonder the church is cautioning its members about using AI.
Yeah.
Or Photoshop.
Let's see here. Whether the product page was revised after submitting the specimen in 24, or whether it was altered for the purpose of creating the specimen, doesn't matter. Either way, the love is spoken here specimen was used to knowingly convey a misleading representation about the ongoing nature of the church's. Because he's right. Like, even if it used to say that, the church chose to use the Wayback Machine, go grab an image from an older moment, rather than the current image, which is clearly demonstrated a branding shift that's abandoned the word Mormon.
Yes.
Yeah. So knowingly convey a misleading representation about the ongoing nature of the church's trademark use relating to the choir, falsely suggesting that the continued use extends beyond the historical CD covers dating well before the church's exhaustive rebranding efforts. LDS Church, all you guys do is lie, lie, lie. And all we do on this side is keep pointing it out. It's actually quite easy to do at this point.
You were right, Rebecca. You saw that coming. Can you read this? I'm sorry. What, Rebecca?
181. I'm just shaking. I am so disappointed. I did not think the church could just disappoint me anymore, but this is so obviously they had to work at these lies. They had to create these things. Sorry. I know.
That's why they charge so much.
It's gross.
This isn't easy making lies this
it's so
this convoluted, being this sneaky.
Sorry, I'm just stunned here. Okay, 181. The declarants did not submit an example of a single CD album recorded by the choir after 2017 as a specimen of use for the March 1st, 2024 declarations to maintain registrations, numbers, this and that.
They didn't, huh?
So no product.
That might be suspicious.
Yeah.
Okay, so they don't do any CD albums after 2017. Remember, 2018 was when President Nelson said no more Mormon. 182, Bill?
The church did not inform the USPTO at the time of submitting its declarations for registrations numbers, the two things it's got to mark for, that the church publicly and permanently abandoned the Mormon Tabernacle Choir marks in 2018, thus intentionally misleading the trademark office examiner to believe that the Mormon Tabernacle Choir marks were in continuous and current use through 2024. You guys got caught. He caught you. It's not going to be good.
No, because one of the things they're asking for in the complaint is for the judge to discontinue these trademarks on the basis that they were obtained fraudulently.
Yeah, we're all going to win at the end of this one, I think. So,
yes. Radio Free Mormon, up your wazoo. 183, on information and belief, the false declarations and misleading specimens filed on March 1st, 2024, were submitted with full knowledge of the church's abandonment of Mormon Tabernacle Choir and full knowledge that any remaining use thereof, including the specimen use, was at best a token, de minimis use, that was done for the purpose of creating the sham appearance of using Mormon Tabernacle Choir in order to fraudulently maintain a federal registration for an abandoned mark. Okay, so that's what they talk about in terms of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. I think we understand what the church is up to. Filings regarding the Mormon Channel mark. It's a similar story there, though perhaps not as the Mormon Tabernacle Choir story has that additional element of the outright deception showing the specimen.
Yep.
That makes it a little more different and more interesting than these other examples, but these other examples are the same in that they are saying that the Mormon Church keeps going to the patent office and saying, we want to renew our our trademarks with Mormon in them during 2018 post period and never telling them that the church has abandoned the word Mormon. Therefore, according to this, obtaining those and continuing and renewing those trademarks fraudulently. So they did it for the Mormon channel. There's all that stuff for the Mormon channel and all the dates. They did it for the Mormon messages, that trademark. Went to the office and got it under false pretenses, according to their complaint. Book of Mormon Stories, Mark. They did the same thing. Remember that little storybook I used to read to my kids?
By the way, just a note, right? Like they've got that up here, Book of Mormon Stories. So that's there, and it's got the Mormon Stories sort of words together. This is an old book though, right? When did the church first come out with these Book of Mormon Stories? Do we know that?
Early 1990s or late 1980s.
Yeah.
I expect I got one as soon as they came off the press so I could indoctrinate my little Radio Free Mormonlings.
Yeah, the light-colored and dark-colored indigenous people.
Jerusalem is a big city. I'm sorry. I would read that to she's my oldest. And she must have been, this is 1990, so she's 2 years going on 3 years at the time. And I'm reading her story before bedtime, and I read her from this book. And at the very beginning, where it talks about Lehi and talks about Jerusalem, it says Jerusalem is a big city. And my little girl would just think that was so important. And she'd look up at me with those big round eyes when I would read that and say earnestly, Jerusalem is a big city. That's why I remember that. Sorry. Okay. A little humanity thrown into this mess of lawyer stuff. So they did it with the Book of Mormon Stories, Mark, the same kind of thing, applying for it, not telling them that the church had abandoned it and getting it under false pretenses. Then we get to G, the church's belated enforcement efforts. So they sat on their rights for 2 decades, and now they're going to start coming at John Dehlin in November. Rebecca, can you read 2:16?
Yeah, let me pull that up here. 2:16. For 2 decades, since the launch of Mormon Stories podcast, as set forth in the preceding allegations, the church was intimately aware of Dehlin and the Mormon Stories podcast and had many direct interactions with Dehlin about the podcast and the content thereof.
As we have seen from preceding paragraphs, we're going to skim over this and get to 222, room 222. Could you read that, Bill?
You got to put it up on the screen for me.
Is that 222?
Yeah, it's
I'm so sorry. Rebecca was reading, but she wasn't reading from the screen. So
no, I'm reading. I can't see the freaking screen. I can only see my phone that's like a centimeter from my face.
All right, 222. Despite finding the church's allegations lacking in merit, particularly following 20 years of inaction and a very public and explicit rebranding campaign to abandon the use of Mormon as a brand, defendants responded to the church's email within 24 hours, expressing a desire to cooperate and make changes to accommodate the church's concerns. Defendants did so in good faith and to avoid the risk of expensive litigation given the stark imbalance of resources between the parties. See Exhibit B.
223, Rebecca.
223. For example, defendants immediately proposed an orange logo to replace the blue Mormon Stories logo, to which the church had objected. Defendants also immediately replaced photos the church identified as copyrighted.
From the first notice of the church's allegation and through months of negotiation, so this started back in November of 25, defendants cooperated in good faith, expressed a willingness to make nearly all of the branding changes the church requested, hoping to find a resolution, despite finding the church's infringement allegations to be without merit. Bill 225.
Defendants voluntarily undertook a variety of changes in the spirit of cooperation with no legal obligation to do so, including changing the Mormon Stories logo to orange, changing the font, discontinuing the use of the defendant's long-used light raised design, even though it came off of freepix.com, and including a reference to Dr. John Dehlin near the logo on its podcast platforms, some of which are illustrated below.
Okay, there's one. There's the orange creamsicle Mormon Stories logo that was changed. There's Dr. John Dehlin. Remember, they wanted to have it called what are ex-Mormon stories
Ex-Mormon Stories with
hosted by
Dr. John Dehlin, all
they
in
wanted,
that circle.
yeah,
What kind of logo is that? It's absolutely ridiculous. The demands that his team considered unreasonable were absolutely unreasonable, and any podcaster or social media presence would have understood what they were asking. That was
When,
just
when,
ridiculous.
when people have spent their life in the church and have deconstructed it and step out, and they're telling their entire journey, it is their Mormon story. It's their Mormon story. It's not yours, LDS Church. It's their Mormon story. They own it. They experienced it. They lived it. It was their life. They spent time in your system. They were deceived, just like you're doing in this lawsuit articulation, and they have a right to speak out and say, "I got deceived and betrayed in my Mormon story."
Yep. Just
very
because
good.
their Mormon story ended up on Mormon Stories with Dr. John Dehlin doesn't make it any less of a Mormon story.
Right. So, Rebecca, can you read 227?
Yeah. My phone keeps like refreshing. Here we go. 227. There it is. Defendants also removed the faint background image of the Christus logo. Apparently they own Christ, which was fairly used to illustrate the subject matter discussed in the podcast from the banner on its YouTube page.
Right. And Bill, February 2026?
Yeah, defendants also adopted at the church's request a disclaimer consistent with standard practice in such situations. The disclaimer was placed in the footer of the Mormon Stories website and in the podcast description field on the platform carrying the Mormon Stories podcast.
On defendant's YouTube channel, the description of the Mormon Stories podcast includes the following statement. Mormon Stories is a product of the Open Stories Foundation, dedicated to supporting Mormons in religious transition. Mormon Stories is not affiliated with, endorsed, or sponsored by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. 230, Rebecca?
Defendant's Spotify channel similarly included the following statement in the description of the Mormon Stories podcast. Mormon Stories is
That'll
a
be
podcast.
enough.
Yeah, it's the same
It's all
thing.
the same.
All the
In-
platforms. Yep, they did it.
In Spotify, Apple, every page of defendant's website has this endorsement, and it's the same language. And then it goes on to 235. Since I interrupted you, could you read 235 and 236, Rebecca?
The church pressed defendants to have the disclaimer displayed and read audibly out loud multiple times during every single podcast episode, and to place the disclaimer in bold white lettering on the top of the banner of the defendants' channels and websites. 236, the
Can I
defendants.
just mention something? I wanted to interrupt you again, but actually, I did want to say this. Nothing says the church is really, really insecure about John Dehlin than what I'm reading here.
It's so in left field for what you would expect in any social media presence, any kind of podcast. It's just not done. It's
They
not
really
done.
think it's John Dehlin is why they're losing members and not because they're chronically dishonest.
Just like those bubbles where none of those were the answers why people were leaving, right? They're blaming John Dehlin. No, this is why I think other podcasters, I think all of us need to make people not even associated with Mormonism aware of this kind of thing. Because if this case goes the other direction, this could hurt all kinds of podcasts that are speaking truth, that are, using criticism, things like that. Imagine if you had to stop every 15 minutes, like I stop you by interrupting, and give some kind of disclaimer. All right.
Almost as bad as a blow and go.
Yeah, that's exactly it. 2:30. In fact,
How did you know
I
what
don't
a blow and go was, Rebecca?
because I'm old. I know all the old timey stuff you do that nobody else does. But I don't know if you saw John Dehlin, and I can't remember the name of the podcast now, but it was really good. He was another YouTuber, and he was saying this stuff is ridiculous. It's going to kill your channel, having to remove it from all these places and putting disclaimers in. And he did stop the podcast every 15 minutes, kind of just to show people what it was like. And there was an audio, this podcast is not associated in any way. And it was the most annoying thing, but we were all laughing watching it, because this is what the church is asking him to do. You just don't do that. Okay, am I on 36?
I think so.
Yes. Okay. Defendants did not agree to this request, finding it unusual unnecessary, and not wanting to effectively have a disclaimer from the product's brand after 20 years of developing the Mormon Stories brand identity, as they rightly should have.
Now, 237, despite the church knowing that defendants voluntarily adopted the foregoing disclaimers at the church's request as early as February 2026, the church knows this. They were in negotiations with John Dehlin. They know what he adopted. They know the changes he made. And yet the church filed the present lawsuit on April 17th, 2 months later, and simultaneously issued a press release titled Getting It Right, which, of course, when the church says it means getting it wrong, because they lied. Folks, I hate to break it to you if you're members of the church in good standing and believe what they're telling you, but they lied about this in their article titled Getting It Right. Of course. Bill, could you read 238?
Defendants were shocked to see their cooperation in branding changes and adoption of a disclaimer to be met with a lawsuit and press release false portraying the preceding events to the public.
That would be one minor spelling error. I noticed a few of them.
Make a note.
But they happen. I mean, it's a 125-page document. And you, Rebecca, for 39?
Yeah, specifically, the church's Getting It Right press release described what happened by indicating that the church proposed several options, but failing to acknowledge that the defendant agreed to many or most of them. It said, the church then engaged in good faith mediation and proposed several options to reduce confusion while minimizing disruption. Really? Every 15 minutes? I'm sorry, this makes me so mad. When those efforts did not result in resolution, the church filed a complaint in federal court to protect its intellectual property.
Worse yet, is quoted below, the church falsely stated that defendants refused to adopt a disclaimer.
Yep.
Leaving the public with the mistaken impression that defendants were unwilling to do so, again from this statement by the church. To address that, the church proposed a simple solution, a brief disclaimer that the podcast is not affiliated with or endorsed by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It had a disclaimer. This is a common and straightforward way to help audiences understand the source of content. That step was not adopted. See, it was adopted and it was changed.
Flat out lie.
It's a flat out lie. As a result, I'm sorry, Rebecca.
I just had to say it again. It's a flat out lie. And for those of us on social media, we saw this picked up by the faithful over and over. He didn't do it. He wouldn't do it. And I don't often get in there in the trenches and fight like that, but I had to say over and over, that is a flat out lie in that press release. It was.
Thank you for bringing up these other podcasts that were used by the church in order to relay their false statement.
Yep.
And Jasmine and you pallbearer brothers, you know, kin and brother of kin or whatever you are, and all you other patsies out there who are carrying the church's water and repeating the church's lies. My question for you is, how do you feel now? How do you think you would feel, Bill, if you were one of them?
Yeah, if I sat back and I was watching all of this unfold, I would, as a believer, I would sit and go, man, my church is really dishonest. And then I would go, as I'm exploring history, then I would go, are they dishonest in other places? And then I find the SEC issue, and I find the way that they've carefully crafted gospel topic essays and how they've carefully crafted the Saints Manual and how they haven't released the Clayton journals yet, which have come out in other means. The 1886 revelation, which they just released, the Council of 50 Minutes that they just released, the framing they have around every problematic issue. And if I was a believer, I know what side of Jeff Strong's data I would be on. I'd be in that 1/3 of the people sitting in the seats who don't believe, or the 40% who've left over the last 2 decades.
Now, I would say when a lie is so egregious like that, members do take note. A lie like the steeple doctrine. Remember when leaders told members to say that temple worship could only happen with a high steeple? Certain members said that's too much. That's beyond the pale. I know that's not true. I know that's
minority
wrong.
Of one.
Yeah, but there are people, there are members that finally they just say that is too much. In good conscience, I know that's not true. And and they start to separate. I saw it with the steeple doctrine. There was a certain percentage that said, I know that's not right. I know it. And I think this is the same kind of thing. If people take the time to dig into this, I think they're going to be horrified at some of these blatant misdirections and lies.
Yes. You may be right.
I hope.
I think there will be some.
Yeah.
Some few. And then it goes on. And whose turn is it now? Is it me?
It's you.
The church's deceptive press release resulted in numerous online comments labeling Dehlin as deceitful, because the church was the one who was lying. But it made Dehlin look like he was being deceitful, which was the whole point, of course. And even threatening comments directed toward Dehlin, such as people hoping that Dehlin is squashed like a cockroach, or threatening Dehlin with something far worse than a lawsuit, like a good foot dusting, perhaps. Bill, could you read 242?
In addition to the press release, the church's allegations of confusion in the complaint are also deceptive and misleading. At paragraph 54 of the complaint, the church identified 15 online comments and falsely characterized them to be comments on the Mormon Stories Facebook and YouTube pages.
Okay, this is going to enter another section of this particular answer. You may recall what it says there, and I recall from reading the complaint that it has to show that people are actually confused by this, right? So they're collecting all these comments and they're saying, look at all the people who are confused, and they reproduce the comments. People are being confused about Mormon Stories being a product of the church, is what the confusion has to be, and that's what they're trying to put them forward as representative of. But then it turns out, and we're not going to go into all these, but we are going to go into the next one because it looks like the church was playing fast and loose with where they got these comments from, these versus how they were representing the comments in their complaint. Rebecca, can you read 243, please?
I'm sorry, I'm reading ahead. And again, I'm disappointed. Like every other paragraph, I'm even more disappointed. I just can't believe this. 243, the church was aware that this was a false statement at the time the complaint was filed. During the parties' negotiations, the church and defendants discussed 33 online comments selected by the church, including the 15 identified in the complaint. On April 8th, 2026, defendants informed the church that the vast majority of the selected comments, and these comments were showing, oh, I'm so confused. I went to Mormon Stories and I didn't know what it was, right? Those were the comments were. The selected comments were not posted on any Mormon Stories social media pages, and that most were comments made recently in response to videos from supporters of the church discussing and celebrating the church's current trademark enforcement efforts against the defendants.
Okay. So having said that much, let's put it this way. There's 2 points I want to make. The first off is apparently there were discussions between the parties about these very comments during negotiations and before the lawsuit was filed. Okay, that's one thing. The second thing is that these weren't even on Mormon Story social pages. Okay, so Bill, let me ask you this, and Rebecca, you as well, okay? If you're going to a group of people that you want to collect comments from to show that they were confused by Mormon Stories and thought that Mormon Stories was actually a product of the church, do you think you would get a more representative and accurate sample if you were collecting comments from before the time that this action became public knowledge or after?
It's clear that when something happens in the Mormon church is putting up some sort of protective mechanism, members and believers are going to rush right in and they're going to side with the church no matter what. So two things. One is, yes, you need to find comments from before that moment to show that people were confused because you're bringing the lawsuit. So you have to show it before the lawsuit is put out. Afterward is just like, oh yeah, see, there's just more of that. You still have to show it happened prior. The best place to show it, if it's real and it's happening, is people commenting on John Dehlin's stuff, because they're going to go there and they're going to go, I thought this was the LDS Church and this isn't. What is this? Those are the comments that don't exist. Why? Because you watch 30 seconds of Mormon Stories and you realize that these people are telling a story that leads people out of the church, or they're telling the history where the church lied, and they're showing things that help people to deconstruct who often leave the church. To go find it among the faithful in the faithful discussion after the fact is sort of rigging the game.
And even the comments that they did find, several of them were exactly what you described, Bill. Oh yeah, I went there once. It took me 10 seconds to figure out it was, the Antichrist. And they included those comments in their claim, the one that the church launched. But I will say, I have comments on my pages in real time that say, "Are you LDS? Are you active? You seem so nice and friendly." And then you say horrible things. Are you LDS? So that's confusion, real-time confusion. I look like a freaking primary president, but I'm saying horrible things, right? And they're confused, and they're asking me on my site. Maybe I should screenshot some of those, but that's an example of real-time confusion about what a site is. They can't tell because I look like a primary president. But
I
yeah,
think that
what
the
they're
Mormon
showing,
Church
that's
should,
not
I
what.
think the Mormon Church should abandon its lawsuit against John and pursue one against you, since you've already admitted that.
Oh God, no, I'm not trying to confuse anybody. I can't help that I look like a primary president. What am I supposed to do? Get a tattoo?
By the way, the other side of the coin is true, RFM. You pointed this out, and you showed it in real time. You created a podcast called Mormon Sunday School.
Mm-hmm.
And there were more than one. There were 3, 4, 5 comments of people going, I knew that wasn't the church, because they're using the word Mormon, and we don't use the word Mormon. That's a bad word in our parlance. So it's not just that no one's confused. It's that people have clearly established that by having the word Mormon, you actually get rid of the confusion.
Yes, it is true. So there's a few more details here. We're not going to go through all these details, but were you just reading 243, Rebecca, or was that someone
Yes,
else?
I was very passionately reading that because these are just making me so disappointed.
Yeah. And 244, in truth, only 6 comments. So that's 6 out of the 33. Only 6 comments were posted on the Mormon Stories Facebook or YouTube pages. The other comments, as defendants had already informed the church before they filed the lawsuit. See, that's the other aspect that I brought up first. They already knew this. They'd already been talking about this in negotiations. And John Dehlin tells them, hey, only 6 of these are on mine. The rest are not. So even with knowledge of that, they filed the lawsuit affirming or claiming that what they knew was incorrect from the negotiations was in fact true. In other words, putting all 33 of the comments down. The other comments, as defendants had already informed the church, were posted in response to third-party videos from faithful members of the church, like David Alexander, discussing and supporting the church's recent trademark enforcement efforts at issue in this case. Bill, 245.
Give me just a second. All right. So 245, on information and belief, the church chose not to provide the links from which the comments were obtained. Well, yeah, this is just standard practice in the LDS Church, is keeping valuable information away from the viewer. The comments were obtained in paragraph 54 in order to conceal its misrepresentation in the complaint.
Yeah. So if they had included the links, the fact that they were not telling the truth about them would be easily discovered by clicking the links. And they knew about it.
Go ahead. Sorry. I was going to say, isn't that just human nature when you go to a video and they're going, oh, we're going to get Mormon stories, right? Which is what these faithful videos are saying. And you're in the comments going, yeah, I was confused for a minute and then I knew it wasn't, but they're terrible. Of course you're going to pile on. That's what you do when you're looking at it from that angle.
It is. And as important it is legally, I'm just going to observe in passing that this is a very big insight into the human mind and how it works.
Yes.
Is that when you know what the right answer is supposed to be, you're much more likely to give it.
Yes.
It goes into a whole lot of things, whether it's religion or UFOs or pretty much anything that human beings are involved in. Coming to a conclusion, a correct conclusion about, it's a lot easier to come to the correct conclusion when you are already told what it is. Okay. So going on, 246.
It might be the correct collusion too, though.
It could be, yes. It could be, because to say otherwise would be its own logical fallacy, I think. You're right. So 246, this is you, Bill?
I'll take it. 2 of the comments in paragraph 54 of the complaint were made just 6 months ago in December 2025 in response to a YouTube video posted by David Alexander, otherwise known as David DeRouche for those of you out there from the Yellow Deli, titled "Hooray! The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints pressures Mormon Stories, types to rebrand." These 2 comments were selected from among 163 comments made in response to the video. For one of the comments, the church selected just 17 words out of the full 166-word comment to put in the complaint, which removed important context. And see the link.
Pretty amazing. Are you still disappointed, Rebecca? Or you're starting to get used to the church lying all over the place?
No, I'm going down the disappointment rabbit hole, and I thought I was immune to all that. It's just,
Well, welcome to my world,
I guess.
by which I mean law. 247, is this you, Rebecca?
It's me. 5 of the comments in paragraph 54 of the complaint were made in November 2025 in response to a YouTube video posted by a podcaster using the name Latter-day Saints and titled "LDS Church Exposes Most Deceptive Anti-Mormon" and Campbell's VP Gross Confession. Okay. It's a news show by the Paul brothers is what that is. This video also reported on and celebrated the recent news of the church accusing defendants of trademark infringement. These 5 comments were selected from among 1,143 comments posted in response to the video. So again, another, rah, rah, hooray, look at him get this anti-Mormon, they're all charged up making those kind of comments.
Yeah, so they're not making these comments in a vacuum as if they were really confused. What they're doing is they're responding to stories by faithful Latter-day Saints saying, isn't it great that the church is putting the screws to Dehlin to drop the Mormon brand? So then you got one of the comments from one of Jasmine Rapley's videos, 249. One of the comments is from a personal X account. Boy, they really track these down. Once again, this is good legal work. For the very few comments.
Service missionaries who are on social media missions. That's my prediction.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Don't you
For
think?
the very few comments that were actually made in response to a Mormon Stories video post, I think they said that was 6 above. None of them expressed source or brand confusion, which is the whole issue here. And they were selectively pulled by the church from among thousands of other comments made in response to videos collectively receiving millions of views. Okay. Goes down with some more details. Bill, can you read 254?
On information and belief, and in view of the history of Dehlin's excommunication, President Oak's aforementioned 2026 talk, the church's belief that defendants are a major cause of a loss of membership, and the church's reliance on online comments reflecting uncertainty about the viewpoints or leanings of the podcast rather than genuine source confusion. The present lawsuit is not motivated by a genuine concern over source affiliation confusion, but instead by a desire to silence or at a minimum limit the reach of the content, opinions, and viewpoints shared on the Mormon Stories podcast and its affiliate sites.
Here's where they're using what President Oak said and really sticking it to him because he gave it away. He gave it away. He didn't talk about audience confusion with any podcast. What he talked about is they're teaching you the wrong stuff. And it continues in 255. Rebecca, do you have that on your phone?
I do. It says, on information and belief, and based on church's delay of 2 decades and its refusal to accept defendants' voluntary cooperation and compromise of changing nearly every branding concern the church raised, the present lawsuit was brought for the improper purpose of using the pressure and expense of the litigation process rather than the meritorious outcome of litigation to achieve the church's desired outcome of diminishing the reach and impact of the defendant's podcast.
All right. Thank you. Now we're going to be able to skip freely. We've got 40 pages left, which will just take us a couple of minutes. Now they have count 1, declaratory judgment of no trademark infringement. So in other words, this is what they're asking the judge to do. Church is asking him to find that John Dehlin infringed the trademark And what they're asking for is the opposite. We want a judgment from you, Judge, that there was no trademark infringement that occurred as being alleged by the plaintiffs. Talks about the use of blue, throws in a Scientology blue in there as well, along with the J-dubs. And the Seventh-day Adventist blue seems to be a very popular color among religious types. I don't know what's up for that with that, but they're throwing them in there to show that what is this blue thing that you're talking about? This doesn't belong to you. Blue does not belong to the Mormon Church, guys. So it goes on, talks about a few more things. We've seen these before, right? This shows a bunch of other colors that are used by the church. One of them's blue. They'll have these light rays things, whether they paid for them or got them free like John Dehlin did. Then they talk about the light rays again, and they actually show that this light ray thing that the church has is actually different from the one that's being used by Mormon Stories. It is a different kind of look. And you can see it there. Here's Mormon Stories is this one. And here's the one in black and white for the church. Yeah, those aren't the same. All right. Then it talks about Microsoft's PowerPoint application for the light waves. See, they've got it there as well. In other words, this is not something that the church can legitimately get some kind of a trademark on. A search in Google's image search using the portion of the church's overlapping triangles trademark used in the church's logos above resulted in hundreds of hits showing blue designs with crisscrossing lines, some of which are depicted below. Looks popular. Remind me to never do that, Bill.
Disney is a big one, and Disney had it before the church, and it even has a sort of a castle looking thing on it. So like a temple.
Oh, yeah. I remember seeing that before. Yeah. I don't know that they included that here in this lawsuit.
No, I'm sure they didn't. It's just kind of an ironic observation. But yeah, it's Disney.
And here's count 2, what they want. And this is where they're synopsizing and then arguing the facts they've placed before. Obviously, we're most interested in the facts. And you can go through this and read this. Count 3, their declaratory judgment that they want. Count 4, declaratory judgment, etc. Count 5. Count 5 is where they want the cancellation of the church's trademark for Mormon with regards to this registration number. And they repeat the facts there. Count 6, they want the cancellation of Mormon.org on the basis that they're alleging that the church gained it under fraudulent means. Count 7, all of these for Book of Mormon marks. That's going to be a bit of a stretch, but I wish them luck, and I'm glad they included it. So they're saying not only have you lost the Mormon, you've lost the Book of Mormon. Yeah, I'm not sure that anything that President Nelson said would extend that far. I think he may have specifically said in some places that the Book of Mormon is excluded from God's revealed will on the issue. Do you remember that?
Sorry, RFM. I was putting a comment up that I thought was interesting.
What is it?
Yeah,
I'm a Nevermone.
That too.
I'm a Nevermone. I stumbled onto the Mormon Stories site, and not for a GD second did I think Mormon Stories was from the LDS Church. Anyone confused needs help. Make sure you collect these comments too, LDS Church.
Yes, exactly. They don't help, do they? And I think that's the realistic way of looking at it. Look, everybody, there's going to be people from all sorts of demographics who are going to watch different shows, and some are going to be more apt to see what's going on than others, maybe. But still, we're talking about a reasonable person. And I'm not sure that I've ever heard anybody reasonably argue that they were confused. You can say you're confused, but what was it about it that confused you? Tell me that, and then we'll have a discussion. So Book of Mormon Stories they're also going after. Count 8. Mormon Channel, they're going after under count 9. They want all of these reversed and the church to lose its trademarks for that, as well as Mormon Messages, as well as for Mormon Tabernacle Choir. You lost that one. Hey, Bill. Yeah. What if we called this the Mormon Tabernacle Choir podcast? Do you think that would piss them off?
If Dehlin wins, I think we ought to trademark a few of these. Yeah, I think we ought to send some trademarks in for a few of these.
We could have Rebecca lead us in an opening hymn every
I think
episode
you're
in order to
right.
justify our use of the term. What do you think about that,
That
Rebecca?
would be perfect. I'm an alto. Are you a tenor or a bass, RFM? What about you, Bill? We'll figure it
Tenor.
out.
Tenor.
Okay, perfect. I can accompany. We'll have to get a soprano. My dog Alice can do that. I'm all over it. Let's do it.
Sure. Very good. Okay, so that's count 11. Continuing on to their prayer for relief. So what they want is everything that the church doesn't want. But in addition, they also want the court to reverse those trademarks. And I think that's great. I think that's pretty clear. Everything that they want is what we would expect them to want, allowing Mormon Stories to continue using Mormon Stories without any other changes than they've already done. They think this is an exceptional case, and I think it's an exceptional case too, but they want attorney's fees, and it would have to be an exceptional case. Here's why they think it's exceptional, okay? The reason they think it's exceptional is basically because in the history of law, I'm not sure that we have a case, at least they haven't found any. We'll see if the judge or his clerks do. A case where there's a trademark violation being issued by a church. So once again, we're bringing in the First Amendment about a podcast, which brings in another part of the First Amendment. And the Mormon Church is saying, we don't want Mormon Stories using Mormon in its podcast name because of all these reasons. But when you break it down, what they're doing is they're saying, we don't want a podcast called Mormon Stories saying bad things about us, which is really what it is. So once you see that, then you can see why this would be a bad thing. In other words, you can say bad things about us, but you can't say Mormon, right? You can't identify yourself in any way that would lead the public to understand that that's what you're about. How would you say, and I don't think this is how Mormon Stories was set up in the first place, but let's say it were set up as a critical organization. If it were set, how would you identify yourself as an organization that's critical of the Mormon Church without using Mormon somewhere in your name, which is why all the plethora of podcasts in the post-Mormon space that use Mormon somewhere in the title. And there's 3 offenders here on the stage right now. How do you do that? You effectively can't, which is really what's driving this. Because then the church drives you into the wilderness and into obscurity where no one can find you because you can't say what you're really about, because the church says you can't criticize us. So you got a multi-billion-dollar church coming down on somebody for saying bad things about them and trying to drive them into oblivion by the use of trademark law.
Yeah, I don't think it's a big tangent that can be utilized like it's some sort of smoking gun or silver bullet. But this idea that, why are Mormons called Mormons? Well, it goes back to the Book of Mormon. Why is the Book of Mormon called the Book of Mormon? Because the church would proclaim that there was an ancient author thousands of years ago named Mormon.
Mm.
And that goes way back beyond some sort of trademark time frame. And you have a system that has other systems that also use the word Mormon at times. And you want to trademark a word based on the book of scripture that all the systems use. And it has that name because of an ancient author, because you can't get on the stand and go, we believe that's a fictional person. They have to say that's a real person. And so that whole name goes back thousands of years. 421 AD anyway. And it just seems like a strange thing that you fight over this word that belongs to a book of scripture that all the communities in the Restoration movement use. And then it goes back one step further to an ancient author who allegedly lived in the Americas just a few hundred years after Christ.
It is somewhat axiomatic that you cannot copyright a real name. I mean, you can, but it's very difficult because it's a proper name. I will note that I've heard that argument made before, and I've heard you say it again, and I think there may be some merit to that. But I also note that it's not an argument that was made in the answer for John Dehlin.
No, that was, if you remember, I did a segment on the newscast about that. It was Chief Miniga that brought up the fact, can you copyright an ancient, indigenous person's name? If you can't, then the other option is that you have to say, oh no, our founder made that up. We can totally copyright that, but you certainly can't say that. So it's an interesting question to discuss, but you're right. It probably does not belong in a serious complaint like this, but it is fascinating.
I'm going to guess that would fall under the religious questions that the courts are not going to get themselves
Right.
involved in.
Exactly.
Also,
Exactly.
yeah. Also, this whole Mormon thing, it doesn't match. Okay. Religion and this trademark thing, it's hard to make them fit because it's not like people are producing widgets or a product or services of some sort that could be easily confused with another brand that's similar to theirs, right? And people are buying widgets from them instead of buying widgets from us, and that's not fair. And that's usually what trademark law is about. This is an inexact fit where you're talking about religions. And because of that, here's Joseph Smith, who's listed in the first edition of the Book of Mormon as the author.
Mm.
Now, I have no problem thinking that that's because it was legally required that the author had to be noted down in order for you to get a copyright. So he put his name down. I don't think it's like this huge red flag that he was admitting that he actually made up the Book of Mormon. He was really the author. But it's things like this where you have this inexact interface between the law and religion, that things like this happen. And I would expect that if that issue were to come up, and they're not raising it that I could see in the answer, John Dehlin's not, probably for a good reason. But I expect courts would get around that in the same way and just say, well, look, we're not looking at this as an ancient person's name. We're looking at this in terms of the Book of Mormon, which came off the press as a creative work in 1830, or at least as a work of literature. They wouldn't even want to take the position of fiction or nonfiction, but it is a work of literature that came off the press first in 1830. So we'll accord it whatever status it has because of that appearance at that time.
And don't you think that's why it's absent from all of this? They don't even want the court to have to even go there or address any of that, possibly taint everything else that is in it. That's kind of what I wonder.
I don't think the judge would.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I don't think they would. But isn't it interesting? It puts the church in a really interesting position because they want to be seen as more mainstream Christian. They want to be Christian. Mormon is not Christian, right? It's right there. Your name is not anything to do with, the Church of Jesus Christ. But in this situation, they have to pretend that they want that word Mormon back, but they really don't, because they want to, they want to appear mainstream Christian more than ever by distancing themselves from the word Mormon. So they're really kind of almost in a catch-22. It's funny.
It is very interesting that this answer exposes their duplicity in this regard, and that they've been continually going back to the trademark office in order to renew their trademarks with the word Mormon in it, while publicly they've been disavowing the term Mormon and saying it's a victory for Satan.
Yep.
So that is the end of this answer. That was 125 pages, which we got done in just over 3 hours. I don't want to go to the other filing tonight. I mean, I would if you threaten my life. There's over 1,100 people watching, so this is definitely of interest, and they're still here after 3 hours. So I can briefly summarize it for you.
Oh my God.
Bill, what do you think? And what do you think, Rebecca, about continuing for what would be at least another hour to go over this other document that was filed today?
You summarizing it would take another hour?
Take an hour.
No, me summarizing it would take less than 5 minutes.
Then I would say give a 5-minute summary, put it up on the screen so people know what document they're looking at. I'll just note, and Rebecca, I shared with you in the private chat on StreamYard, I uploaded all of those documents to our website and then posted it in our YouTube version of tonight's newscast, but I gave it to you so you could copy over to your version on YouTube. And so folks, if you go to the Mormon Discussion channel and click on the newscast, go into the show notes of this episode. So if you're watching it on YouTube right now, right down below, I left the links for all of these documents so that you can quickly upload them onto your screen and read them yourself. But I think a 5-minute summary would be great.
And then maybe RFM, for one of your RFM episodes, like this weekend, you should dig in to what we haven't been able to cover, because I have seen people asking about that. And I think maybe that you should do that in another separate little 2 or 3 hour podcast.
I will give that some thought.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I won't. I really will give it some thought. I know Bill's laughing, but I meant that.
I'm
You know,
laughing.
you're blowing me off. I would do it if I
No, no,
could.
no,
But
no, no. That's what I'm trying to assure you. I'm
Colby,
not
how
blowing
would
you
you
off.
like to come on more?
I'm only laughing
I'm
because
available tomorrow.
it's just another 2 or 3 hours, you know.
Well, for RFM, it is just another 2 or 3 hours. These things go long. I did the BAM reading with him, and it went like 4.5 hours. Oh,
Yes, I'm still having nightmares about that.
I am too.
Okay, so here it is. This is the let me see. Do I have it up there? Yes, I do. Let's see. Is this working now? Can you see it moving?
Uh-huh.
Hang on a second here. I'm on the
Oh, wait.
wrong page. This is it. Okay, so this
There it
is the motion to dismiss that was also filed today by John Dehlin and his attorneys. Same case number, same judge, same heading, but it's a motion to dismiss. So here's the table of contents. Here's where they got to put down all the authority that they're citing to. This is the table of contents. It's a regular table of contents. Now we get to the table of authorities, which contains all of the authorities that they're citing to. You got to do this. This is usually appellate work, but maybe they got to do it down there as well on the trial court level. In Utah, looks very, very official and all that stuff. Now we finally get to this, okay? As set forth herein, plaintiff's claim under counts 1 and 4, the church's claims are subject to dismissal on various independent grounds, including the First Amendment, latches, failure to plead essential elements, and unreasonably vague pleading. Now, in the unreasonably vague pleading, that's where they're talking about. They never say when in any of this, in any of their complaint. And they're doing that on purpose in order to obfuscate the issue. And that is a basis. This unreasonably vague pleading is a basis for dismissal. Really, latches is what's going to get them there, I think. But they're saying, look, just the word Mormon alone, you don't have a right to that. You don't have a trademark to that anymore. And so all the stuff that we've already gone over applies there. And they may win on that too. Plaintiff's trademark claims are barred by the First Amendment. All right. So it talks about that, why it is barred by the First Amendment. And it also talks about the fact that we're not talking about the name of a product or a service. We're talking about the title of a podcast. And the title of a podcast is when you're talking, and talking is generally protected by the First Amendment. So your title then becomes more of a creative expression. And it is given heightened First Amendment protection in the context of Mormon Stories. That's what this first part talks about. Are there any questions about that or comments? Nope. Okay, so they say dismissal is warranted under Rogers. They're going to take a number of pages to talk about different cases. Rogers is an important case that's in the Second Circuit. That's a different circuit. There are different circuits in the federal court system. Utah, I think, is in the 10th. This is the second. So a decision from a different circuit is not binding on the 10th Circuit. They have their own independent lines of authority. Now, if it goes all the way up to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court rules, then all the circuits are bound to follow Supreme Court precedent. But as between the different courts, if it doesn't go up to the Supreme Court, then Second Circuit is not bound by anything in any other circuit. Now, it may have what's called persuasive force, but that's up to the circuit and whether they want to follow that. It's just a suggestion as far as they're concerned. So Rogers is a Second Circuit court, and it talks about dismissal is warranted under Rogers. In other words, Rogers set forth under similar circumstances this standard that people in the church's position who are claiming trademark infringement have to show in order to win. And under that standard and the different elements of that standard, it says the church should lose here because they have not satisfied Rogers. Okay. It quotes from Rogers, for all these reasons, the expressive elements of titles, the expressive elements, requires more protection than the labeling of ordinary commercial products. That's that part I was talking about the creativity of a podcast and the heightened First Amendment protection it receives. So Rogers, it talks about factor one, artistic and editorial relevance. So this is more artistic than it is just selling widgets. And it goes on to talk about how they're arguing that Rogers favors John Dehlin, and Rogers factor two. So there's two factors, I think, in this one. It's not explicitly misleading. well, this isn't explicitly misleading. No, at no time has John Dehlin ever explicitly misled people into thinking that what he talks about is sanctioned by the church, to my knowledge. Either of you? Rebecca, have you ever heard John Dehlin expressly state that what he's saying is officially from the church?
Oh, no. He says the opposite, but he does say, I still consider myself a Mormon. I say that too. A lot of us say that, meaning that that's who we are culturally. That's how we were raised. That's our background. And we're still going to own that. Although our Mormonness and journey led us away from institutionalized Mormonism. So that's the only thing I can think of I've ever heard John say, is just continuing to say, I'm going to own, myself as a Mormon, which I do too. And a lot of us do.
And it says quite the contrary. And then it talks about the written disclaimers. Now, B, dismissal is also warranted under the more stringent Stouffer factor. So if you go to Stouffer, that's 10th Circuit District Court. So this is not as on point, but it's in their district, I believe it is. I think I might have been saying circuit earlier. But anyway, they're just trying to analogize. Now, Stouffer has a more stringent standard. Once again, they're not bound to follow each other's precedent. So different districts can have different standards on the same issue. And Stouffer makes it harder for John Dehlin to win and easier for the church to make its case. But even under Stouffer in the District of Colorado, the argument is here, even under those more stringent factors enunciated in the Stouffer case, the church still loses. Okay, so that's what's going on here. Any questions or comments about that? Okay, so there's a whole bunch. There's 6 different factors in this one. Appellate courts love coming up with factors, believe me. And here's they go through factor 1 in the Stouffer, and they're going to argue about that. Stouffer factor 2, Stouffer factor 3, Stouffer factor 4, Stouffer factors 5 and 6. Okay, so they're arguing that even so, this should be dismissed. And then it goes to the Jack Daniels decision does not preclude dismissal under Rogers or Stouffer. So there's a decision out there from one of this is the Supreme Court's decision in Jack Daniels Properties, Inc. versus VIP Products. It's a similar trademark case from 2023. So what they're saying is we're aware of the Jack Daniels case from the Supreme Court, but we're preemptively and proactively telling the court that the Jack Daniels decision does not preclude dismissal under Rogers or Stouffer because Jack Daniels could be misread that way, but actually doesn't state that. So obviously the church is going to be relying on Jack Daniels while John Dehlin is trying to distinguish Jack Daniels from this case. The main thing is, let me see if I can even remember the main thing. Oh, yeah, you can see how long they have to go on about it. Here it is. Can you read this part that's highlighted, Rebecca?
Yes, I think no, you know what? I can't because I don't have it up on my phone anymore. Bill, do you have it on yours?
I can see it on the screen.
Okay, good. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I pulled it all down because I thought we were done. Silly me.
Indeed, the circumstances surrounding the Mormon Stories podcast are uniquely compelling for purposes of First Amendment protection. The podcast is a nonprofit endeavor that gives a voice to opinions and information on the aforementioned matters of public interest, focusing on topic relating to religious expression and thus offering non-commercial speech that is often directed at and sometimes critical of the party attempting to enforce its trademarks. Here, the defendants contend this case is unique in the foregoing facts and that those facts demand defendants' use of Mormon Stories be given the highest level of First Amendment protection available.
That's the other thing. Mormon Stories is a nonprofit. Okay, so that's why they're saying that it should be given the highest First Amendment protections. Then they go on, plaintiff's trademarks claims are barred by latches. Now, this is a doctrine that basically means if you don't use it, you lose it. You can lose your rights by sleeping on them. And they did for 20 years. And not only did they do that, they affirmatively said, we don't want the term Mormon anymore since 2018. So this is their second claim. And I think this is their strongest. The first one could win, but I think the second one will definitely. So it talks about the Lanham Act. It talks about, although laches is an affirmative defense, this is a kind of an important point for law geeks. Laches is an affirmative defense, which means you have to prove that stuff at trial. An affirmative defense has to be proven at trial. But what they're saying is, even though usually you have to prove this at trial, we're asking the court to dismiss this pre-trial because it's so obvious. It's so, it is such a violation of this doctrine. And the church, in its complaint, its initial filing with the court, admitted to all the facts necessary for the court to find this. So in other words, what they're saying is the church has already admitted to it. Now we just need the court to find as a matter of law that this does constitute a violation of the doctrine of laches. Did that part make sense? Okay, so the defense of laches bars a claim when there is two things: an unreasonable lack of diligence by the plaintiff in enforcing its rights, and B, prejudice to the defendant. So once again, it's presumed if the time has been long enough, and here it's not just presumed, it's actually demonstrable. So because of that, they're asking the judge to dismiss the case. Plaintiff's inexcusable delay. We've seen how inexcusable that delay is, but that's one of the elements to prove laches. So it's definitely an inexcusable delay. I have a hard time coming to any other or seeing other reasonable conclusion. Plaintiff's complaint correctly alleges that defendants began using the Mormon Stories title for their podcast in 2005, 20 years before the church took the present enforcement actions. So there they're showing what the church already admits to in its complaint and how laches defeats their complaint. The complaint shows that Mormon Stories podcast has been featured in national outlets. Once again, it's recapitulating things that we read in the answer, this being the separate filing of the motion to dismiss. But there's a lot of facts that are in common between the two. Defendants' widespread open use of Mormon Stories for decades leaves no room for an inference other than the church having knowledge of the accused actions. That's important for laches too. The church knew or should have known. Even taking the pleaded allegations in the light most favorable to plaintiffs. Even if we construe this in the light most favorable to the church that made the complaint and put all these facts in there, the church's delay in bringing suit is at least 5 times longer than the analogous 3-year statute of limitations period, giving rise to a particularly strong presumption of laches here. Defendant's prejudice beyond the presumption of laches. Okay, the presumption that there is prejudice beyond the presumption of laches. They're going to show that, yes, John Dehlin has been prejudiced because he spent 20 years pouring his heart and soul and money and everything into promoting Mormon Stories. That's the prejudice. Any comments from either you, Bill, or Rebecca?
I think the time one's interesting, right? Like, even if you grant everything you grant that the church was honest, you grant that that everything was legit about their argument, it's 5 times longer than the 3-year period you're allowed in the church. And it also is demonstrated that the church had plenty of interaction with John Dehlin and with Mormon Stories. Why now? Why now? Maybe it's Jeff Strong's data. Why now?
And you'll see right above where it says defendant's prejudice, they're citing a bunch of cases. Here's one at the end where they're citing to Hot Wax Inc. versus Turtle Wax Inc. 7th Circuit, 1999, affirming summary judgment dismissal of trademark claim for laches based on 20-year delay. That's the same delay, just happens to be the same fact. That's a good case. Hopefully they will consider that to be persuasive authority from another jurisdiction. So they're going to show how John was prejudiced, as the complaint makes clear. They keep repeating this because they're showing that all the facts to establish the defendant's defense of laches are already being alleged in the plaintiff's complaint.
And can I say, Bill, somebody is mentioning in the comments that you haven't included a link to the dismissal. I can't find it on my, that's why I'm not able to read, but I don't know if you have or haven't.
What is there dismissal?
Anyway, if we can.
There were 7 documents that let me see if I can find.
It's in there somewhere, I'm sure. I can't find it, so don't
You mean
ask
the
me.
motion to dismiss?
Okay.
Yeah.
Request motion. I'm not using the correct legal terms. It's 9:30. I need to
I'm
have
not
dinner.
trying to be pedantic. I am just trying to understand you because I was wondering
Whatever
where
you're
did their
reading
dismissal?
now, they're saying in the comments they are not able to follow along because it hasn't been included in the places others were included. So that's all.
I
And I
So they're
will
talking about this.
add it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm reading now is this motion to dismiss.
Right. Motion to
got it
dismiss,
here. I'll
everybody,
add-
not request.
Yeah, I see it.
No,
So I
no,
add
you
it
had said
now.
dismissal. That's what confused me.
I said request for dismissal, which
Yeah.
Oh, I just heard
to me sort
dismissal.
of means the same thing as motion to dismiss.
No, it
but
does. It does. I
probably
just heard
not.
dismissal. So I just
Sorry,
thought.
I have very
you
low
said
blood
that.
sugar. I haven't had dinner yet.
Well, why don't you get something to eat and eat right
Well,
now?
I'm finishing this out. Gosh darn it. Come on.
Okay.
We're almost done.
You know, Nemo eats during podcasts. I don't see why you shouldn't.
I would have to cook something first, and I didn't have time to do that either. So
You could get some jammy Dodgers. Is that what you call
you
them?
know what? Those are so good. I love those. Yes, I bought some.
Well, do you still have them?
No, not now.
Okay.
Cookies don't last long around me. Yeah, I have a sweet tooth.
Were you going to blame Angry Alice there for a second?
No, she's outside. I can't even get up to let her in. She's scratching the hell out of my door right now. So let's forge ahead. Let's do it.
Okay, well, I will. I'm just sort of looking for a high sign from Bill. Okay, he's got it up there.
Okay.
If you refresh your YouTube, folks, it is now down in the YouTube description. It is the very first link at the very bottom where it says Mormon Stories, legal documents. It is now there.
Good job. Thank you. We're on page 26, as the complaint makes clear. So once again, they're recapitulating facts that we've already gone over to argue that, yeah, John Dehlin has been prejudiced like hell. 20 years, while the church has done nothing, he's been out there working himself to the bone to promote and expand and grow this podcast and the family of podcasts as well. So he's definitely prejudiced. Once again, page 27, plaintiff's complaint allegations prove that allowing plaintiffs to pursue their inexcusably belated trademark action would cause defendants severe prejudice by upending more than 20 years of growth and investment. Plaintiffs cannot rationalize their extreme delay by creating a post hoc narrative about defendants' supposed evolution or development over the years. The church fails to provide a clear picture of its trademark theories. Now, that was the end of the latches argument. But now it talks about how the church fails to provide a clear picture of its trademark theories. I don't know if these are going to win the day. Maybe they will. I don't know that they will to the exclusion of latches. But it's interesting that they put this in here as well, because they talk about how the church is hazy in its complaint. It doesn't seem to want to give a clear picture of its trademark theories. Are you there, Rebecca? Are you on page 29? And are you able to read?
I don't have the document.
Read anything here?
No, I can't, because I can't get into YouTube without going around and getting out of here, and I can't do it on my phone. So you're going to have to read
that first. Just that one sentence.
Yeah. First, the complaint recites conclusory allegations claiming that plaintiffs' Mormon-styled trademarks constitute a family of marks.
I remember that specifically. So a conclusory statement is one that is not fact-based. It's just, you just concluded this. And you're not setting out any facts to support your conclusion. That's what a conclusory allegation is. Claiming that plaintiffs' Mormon-style trademarks constitute a family of marks. The complaint, however, lacks any well-pleaded facts to plausibly claim ownership of a family of marks, which requires facts showing the church sufficiently advertised or promoted Mormon-styled marks to generate a recognition that the church possessed a family of marks using Mormon. This is getting a little bit more into the nerdy aspects, perhaps, of the law. But second, the complaint fails to provide sufficient clarity regarding the basis for its trademark infringement claims. And this is where it just says the complaint broadly defines plaintiffs' marks to collectively include this alleged family of 9 so-called Mormon marks. And then they have a line in here that does a great job of summarizing this. I think this is it. In essence, plaintiffs allege, that's the church alleges, that all of John Dehlin's collective actions infringe all of plaintiffs' collective trademarks. So they created this family summarily of trademarks that they say the church owns, whether it's blue, light rays, font, all that stuff, right? Mormon. And then they showed there, well, there's this family that John Dehlin has, and they're just saying that all of John Dehlin's collective actions infringe all of the church's collective trademarks. You have to be more specific than that. You can't just say, well, what you're doing over here is infringing my trademark over here. You have to be specific and show it instead of just talking about families on both sides. Does that part make sense? I'm going to guess you're nodding or asleep because I can't see you at this point.
Yeah.
Number 4, plaintiff's copyright claim should be dismissed for failure to plead when the alleged infringements occurred. Okay, I started with this. This is very important. So in order to plead properly a copyright claim, you got to do a few things. And number 4 of which is you got to say during what time the defendant has infringed the copyright. Not only that they did it, how they did it, where they did it, and when they did it. Because when becomes very important, as we've talked about before. The same defect exists here, Dehlin says in his motion to dismiss. Plaintiffs identify a number of copyrighted images and provide side-by-side comparisons in Exhibit 2, but neither the complaint nor Exhibit 2 identify when any alleged infringement occurred. And this is what gets the church making these broad allegations without saying when it happened, avoiding the timeline like I talked about, which is supplied by John Dehlin's attorneys in their answer, which gives a lie to how the church is representing things. They're making things intentionally confusing because it benefits them. And if they had made them clear, and they know what the clarity is, it would have shown that it doesn't help their case, it hurts their case, which is why they were unclear in the first place. Okay. Accordingly, the court should dismiss count 4. That's based upon this one particular argument. At a minimum, if plaintiffs are allowed to amend, the court should require plaintiffs to identify with specificity for each allegedly infringed work the dates and time periods during which the alleged infringement occurred. Okay, and that is basically an alternative argument. Latches covers all of it. And the first one about Mormon covers everything relating to Mormon, use of the word Mormon in that complaint, which I think is really what the church is about. And so they have filed this today. The conclusion is, in view of the foregoing, defendants respectfully move the court to dismiss counts 1 through 4 of the complaint, respectfully submitted, et cetera, et cetera. And now what's going to be left to have happen is for the church to file a response and for the defendants to file a note for calendar to schedule that particular motion to dismiss for a hearing before the judge. And I think that's the first thing that's going to happen. And I think maybe one of the people will want to do some discovery, and then the other side will say, no, we should wait to do discovery until we hear from the judge on the motion to dismiss, because if the judge dismisses this thing, we're not going to be needing any discovery.
Discovery could be interesting. Get to ask a lot of questions in discovery. How much money did you spend on the rebranding, for instance?
Yeah, and I think that could be relevant. A lot of times people want to get into things that have no relevance just because it's things they're interested in. The law doesn't allow that. It's got to be relevant, or at least look like it's heading toward the discovery of something.
Yeah, well, the money you're willing to spend on distancing yourself and eradicating that name, to me, speaks directly to how much you want to eradicate it, how important it is that you're no longer known as a Mormon. So to me, that's really relevant.
I think it is. I think reasonably it's relevant. Now, to take that and try and bootstrap it into, we want to know how much money the church has, that wouldn't be relevant. Unless you're trying to say, well, it's this percentage of how much you have that makes the relevance. Yeah, the judge probably not going to go that far.
No, but I think members, maybe some members, again, would be horrified to know that it costs $950 million to change all the, I'm just throwing that number out there, but they're saying it's very, very, very large. Maybe some members would go, you know what, that that's a lot. And I wonder, just a little seed of something.
Especially when 10 years earlier, I would also want to ask, how much did you spend on the I Am a Mormon campaign and the I Am a Mormon movie? And then only this much time later, how much did you spend to get rid of all of it?
Yeah. Is God a flip-flop? No, we couldn't imagine that. No, it really does. It really kind of breaks your brain open a little bit. So
I think those are both relevant inquiries. I think the judge will find that they are relevant, and then the church is going to interpose a motion to have any answers that they give to those sealed.
Oh.
And the judge will probably grant that, and then it will resolve short of a trial, so none of that will come to light. But it's going to get dismissed. I think this has a good chance of getting kicked out of court by Judge Shelby when they have this motion to dismiss. That latches thing is going to screw them up.
It will get dismissed, perhaps. Will it also, by the way, the church learned today that they caught us on that Mormon Tabernacle Choir thing. And they caught us on this and they caught us on that. Like, they're learning today that that's in there. When the court dismisses the case, would they still have to rule a judgment on the dishonest trademarks that the church has had? No. The only way that gets
Wait a second. Let me back up.
In other words, could the judge dismiss the case for Mormon Stories?
Yes.
But also go like, you can't have these trademarks anymore.
Yeah, let me back up and modify that answer because I think I was wrong. Okay, so the judge, here's the thing. Mormon Stories has not just filed an answer, it has filed counterclaims. Each of those counterclaims act as if they are independent lawsuits. So a judge can dismiss the lawsuit by the church against Mormon Stories pursuant to the motion by Mormon Stories. But that doesn't dismiss the counterclaims that Mormon Stories has leveled against the church. See, that's one of the things that you learn in civil law, at least at some point, is that if you got a lawsuit that's filed against you and you start, finding stuff that's really going to be good for your client and bad for the ones who filed the lawsuit, they can dismiss that lawsuit at any point. They're the plaintiffs. They have the power to bring it. They have the power to dismiss it. But if you file counterclaims, they can't dismiss your counterclaims. They can dismiss their lawsuit, but they can't dismiss your counterclaims.
So then what happens to the counterclaims? Is that then before a judge?
Before the same judge, it's the same case.
Prosecutes it? Who defends?
It's the same
So
party.
John's lawyers would say, okay, John's fine. You go on vacation. Now I'm going to court and I'm going to make sure that you guys cannot use the word more. They would still continue fighting.
Or they could drop it too, right?
Or they could drop
it.
it.
There is a negotiated settlement between the parties, yes.
Which might happen. See, what I see people being concerned about, I think as they start looking through the lawsuit, they're like, this is great. This seems to us very, very clear cut as far as what the church has done and then all the legs that John has to stand on. But everybody's like, but there's so much money. Money can win it all. I mean, do you know what I mean? People are just afraid. They're like, you can buy anything. You can win any case in the world with money. It doesn't matter what we read here tonight. Somehow money is going to make it not work favorably for John. And a lot of people have reached out to me and said that it doesn't matter. The money will win. In what scenario does that happen?
$300 billion is going to get its ass kicked out of court on this motion to dismiss.
Okay. So money doesn't factor into it. They could appeal, that kind of stuff, but
they can appeal. And
they could drag out the process. Yeah,
yes, they can appeal, and that's
true.
True.
Pay the judge. Okay, because I know people are
worried.
We're
not talking about paying the judge, Rebecca.
I'm making a joke, of course.
Think about the other side of the coin, though, right? If you're a law firm who makes national news and puts the LDS Church in its place, that's worth something too. Yeah. That puts you on the map, and people now come to you for other things that you never would have gotten before.
Oh, you mean John's lawyers?
Yeah. If you're a law firm who put together this complaint with these deceptions, that also says something. And that's why I think this is bigger than just this. I think we just need to try to get this in front of a lot of different media, a lot of different people. It's very intriguing. All the players, all the law behind it, like we talked about tonight, all the amendments involved. It's an extremely unique case that I think a lot of people should be interested in.
Now it's extremely unique.
There will be a newspaper article in the morning when you guys wake up from
Rebecca said it's already posted.
Yeah.
no, not the Salt Lake Tribune, from a major newspaper,
Good.
newspaper.
Oh, good.
Like
I
what?
was
The
hoping.
National Enquirer?
I don't want to give the church any advance notice that they can make phone calls and do whatever.
Yeah, no, it has to catch fire, and it should. It is a very unique and intriguing scenario that crosses over, intersects with all kinds of different arenas. So anybody that can do their part to just bring this to the attention of podcasters or media or newspapers, it's just fascinating to dig in and see what's really going on here and what's at stake for not just Mormon Stories, but social media, podcasters, everybody.
As long as we were running the lawyers up the flagpole and saluting them, I thought we should do that by name. So here's Mark A. Miller, Elliot Hales, Olivia McQuarrie from Dorsey and Whitney LLP, Mike Keys from Dorsey and Whitney LLP. What? I'm sorry?
They're great, by the way. Yes.
Oh, which ones?
All three of them. That's all the same law firm.
Yes.
Not Mike Keys, but I don't know him, but the three on the top there, Dorsey and Whitney LLP, which it still says Dorsey Whitney LLP in the bottom one as well.
Right. Yeah. These are John's lawyers, right? These are not the church's lawyers.
Right. All of these are John's lawyers.
Okay.
So, yeah, one's from Seattle and one's from the office in Salt Lake. And that's why they have two different mentions, I think, of the name of Dorsey and Whitney. So, the Potomac Law Group in Washington, D.C., Alyssa Brockbank Reese, Pro Hac Vici, and Ryan E. Hatch, Pro Hac Vici. So is Mike Keys, Pro Hac Vici. By the way, that Pro Hac Vici just means you're from out of state. You're out of the jurisdiction, and you are doing it with the permission of the court to proceed on that case only. But you have to have permission of the court to do that. I don't know if you have to have permission of the court to write a brief, but we'll see how that continues when actual appearances are being made by attorneys.
When the church writes its response, it will have to respond to the countersuit.
Yes.
And we'll get to read that one and know what they have to say about all the allegations of dishonesty and deception.
Yes.
That'll be interesting.
Well, and probably by tomorrow, we will see some faithful podcasters who are talking about this complaint and making sure everybody knows that there's nothing in it. And the church's suit is the only true suit. I'm sure we'll see that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Well, I am impressed with this. It's 125 pages. And by 125 pages, I mean, it's not only taking a long time to go over, but took a long time to write. There's all that many opportunities to have bad parts or weak spots. And like I said, I only identified the one. But I think, and there's many, many very strong places in it. There are case-winning paragraphs in this answer. And I think they did a great job. And I think they earned their money.
Ooh.
Not the church lawyers.
Yeah.
By the way, this guy, only since this all started happening.
I love this guy.
Yeah. He might be joking. I don't know. But he says it. He says like the sixth time he said this.
Yeah. I thought this was a pro LDS channel. It says Mormon in the channel name.
Yeah.
The Shopen Dopen pretending that he's as dumb as many Mormons are or pretend to be.
Well, we're trying to help the church do better by pointing out that their suit has a lot to be desired.
Even the Midnight Mormons changed their name over this whole Mormon thing.
Yeah, everybody did. Fair Mormon became Fair Latter-day Saint, I think. Yeah, I mean, it's. But how would you know that if you were a trademark office? You wouldn't understand. You wouldn't understand that a church has that much power to change your name, has the money to change your name. You would never research what doesn't exist. It's a void. You research the other way around. Is there something that exists with a name? So, yeah.
Yeah, lots of people changed their name. There was something else. Was it 3 Mormons and a baby or something? What was that podcast called that Kwaku started on and then left?
Oh, yeah.
3 Mormons. It became Saints Unscripted.
Yep.
Three Mormons, I think.
Oh, yeah. They went after the Mormon cricket. Remember that? We reported on that. They went after the Mormon cricket.
Mike Lee didn't want the crickets named after him.
The Latter-day Church of the Latter-day Cricket. I mean, it's, oh my God. It's okay. We have to end. I have a headache.
Well, folks, I have to tell you, it's been 3 hours and 47 minutes. Rebecca has to eat because she's fading fast. And
somebody bring me dinner. Gosh darn it. No, but we better go through our final slides. Otherwise, people won't know the other amazing stuff that's coming up this
I'm
week.
going to DoorDash you something. What's your address, Rebecca?
Yes, let me make that public. My address is... No, I'm not going to. All right, let's get her final
You're
slide.
lost.
No, RFM, amazing job. It was incredible. And I've seen people in the comments say that they appreciate you being able to explain the law in a way that people can understand. Do you know what I mean? And answering our questions that we ask as lay people, without too much mockery or making fun of us, and, helping to get the point across. So you do
And
a
I
great
didn't
job.
mean to make fun of you about anything except very unique and extremely unique.
I know. I love it when you make fun of me. Okay. Ooh, Bill, let's go over the cruise really quick, and then we'll jump into what's coming up this week. And then we will all go home, go to bed, and have dinner in that order or not.
The cruise runs on Carnival Cruise Line September 13th through September 20th. We're going to go to the Mexican Riviera. Going to be a ton of fun. All the influencers with the three of us included down there below. If you want to go on this cruise, you're going to want to go to khegseth.travel.com/post-Mormon-celebration-cruise. And that link is there at the bottom. So you can pause that, type that into your URL browser, and come on the cruise with us. We're going to have so much fun. You can hang out with me at the karaoke events. You can go with RFM as he's chilling in the hot tub, or Rebecca while she's doing whatever Rebecca does. I don't know.
Maybe yoga, maybe a spa day after this. So, and think about this. By then, we are going to know a lot more about this lawsuit and how it's progressing.
Ooh.
It'll be really interesting to discuss it. Maybe it will be a celebration of the lawsuit being dismissed cruise. So there's over 200 people going already.
While we're having him walk the plank.
There
It
you
could
go.
be that. It could be that. So anyway, come hang out with us. It'll be really fun. Let's see. Going into next week quickly on the radar. Mine is first tomorrow night, Tuesday. We all heard President Oaks addressing mission presidents and saying we have more missionaries than ever in the entire history of the world, right? Well, I grabbed Ron Jorgensen on the show, and oh my God, somebody just delivered Kentucky. Oh my God. I have KFC.
You're welcome, Rebecca.
It was my dog, Alice. Thank you, RFM. I should have said it was you. Anyway, Ron Jorgensen, we're going to talk about the truth about President Oaks's missionary stats. Are they really what he's saying they are? Do we have this ungodly amount of missionaries out there? It's not a super long episode, but it's going to be very interesting tomorrow night, Tuesday, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Everybody come join us.
Did you order that KFC for her at the beginning of that 5-minute summary?
That was it. I'm literally going to dig in right now. Keep talking. Go ahead.
You know what the weird thing is?
Wait, where's the gravy?
Smell it from here.
Yeah.
That's really weird. Is that original recipe?
Do you know what's funny though? I said Kentucky Fried Chicken. Kids don't even know that's what it used to be called. It's KFC, right? Because they had to get rid of the word fried. That tells you how old I am. Kentucky Fried Chicken.
What are you talking about? They had to get rid of the word fried.
They say KFC now. Ask a kid. They don't even know it was called fried chicken. They don't even know.
One better, BW3. Buffalo Wild Wings and Weck, and it was a beef weck sandwich they made. It was not a hit. They got rid of it and just changed to Buffalo Wild Wings. So Mormonism isn't the only entity abandoning words. KFC and Buffalo Wild Wings have done it too.
What do you guys have coming
up?
The
problem is it because the colonel used to administer weed to the chickens before killing them?
Well, yeah, there was something. They still use his little face, though. Look how cute he is. Colonel Sanders. There he is.
I do declare.
I do declare. That's right.
I'm not doing any accents tonight. Thank you very much.
Oh, gosh. Yes. No, we're not doing any accents. Not Colonel Sanders.
Wednesday.
Okay. All right. What do you guys have coming up on Wednesday and beyond?
Wednesday, 6 p.m. We're going to talk about this Jeremy Hoop and how he got the William Clayton journals, and if his story makes a lot of sense. I see some places maybe he didn't work out his reasoning there, and he says these journals have nothing to do with Joseph Smith's polygamy. There's nothing to worry about. We're going to find out if that's true. I don't think it is, and we're going to examine that, and we're just going to talk about some of the cool things that are in these journals. So I don't think you're going to miss this. This should be a really fun episode.
Yeah, the time in the journals where it mentions that Joseph Smith got charged with a civil case of committing adultery, that had nothing to do with polygamy.
No, not at all.
He wasn't marrying the woman he was committing adultery with. It's adultery, not polygamy. Come on.
And then this is Thursday morning, the next in the series of a logical deconstruction of Mormonism. This one will be on polygamy being required for exaltation and then being done away with the manifesto, and whether the church's logic around that adds up. And so that'll be a nice little short episode on Thursday morning.
And Mormonism After Dark Friday, we'll have a great time. And I think I've got a special guest, and I think it's going to be someone who's a military chaplain who can actually speak with some authority, although in an kind of a familiar kind of way. we'll have a good discussion, but about what the heck it means when the Department of
Yeah.
War lists Mormon as a non-Christian church. And does that really mean that there's being some kind of religious classification going on, or is it something else entirely different than that you would know if you remember the military, but that might not occur to you if you're not?
Oh, that's awesome. I'm watching because remember I covered that last week, that it's about supply, not religion. Interesting.
Yes, very good. Radio Free Mormon Saturday is going to have a great episode. It's obviously not going to be me reading the motion to dismiss. Okay, it's going to be something different than that. But I have something planned. It's going to be great. You're going to love it. Trust me. And then we're back to square one. I'm gonna sign out. Say anything that you want before I go. Rebecca, I want to see you eating a piece of chicken on the exit.
I've got my chicken. I've got my bucket. I'm ready. I'm not kidding. I'm going to get in bed. I'm going to take a drumstick. I would never film this, but this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to fall asleep with my Colonel Sanders bucket. There we go. Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you for hanging in there with us. I think this was really important. We knew it was going to go a little long. I'm glad we forged ahead because those last things that you talked about, RFM, that was very important. And I hope everybody can fast forward through this, right, in the future and only watch it in maybe 2 hours. And we will continue to update you here on the Mormon Newscast about everything to do with this lawsuit, all the other news that's going on. Please continue to update us. We appreciate it when you guys send us stories and links and things that are of interest. That is how we get the news. It's all crowdsourced. So thank you, Bill. Thank you, RFM. Thank you, Colonel Sanders. And we will see everybody next Monday. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
That's a wrap for this week's edition of the Mormon Newscast. We appreciate you tuning in and sharing this time with us. Keep the conversation going and stay informed on all things Mormonism. Until next week, wishing you peace and joy. See you next Monday at 6 p.m. on the Mormon Newscast.